Chapter 7:17. In many cases, the truth did not exist objectively, but was artificially created from top to bottom. People's ability to observe was limited. A pair of eyes could not see through the secular world of 9 regions, and a pair of ears could not hear all the secrets of the world. Most of the information was obtained from all sorts of bystanders. If one looked at the dissemination of this information, one would find that it was a 3-dimensional network. This network was like a cone, from top to bottom, spreading rapidly from one point to multiple levels and dimensions. There were countless nodes on this cone. Most of the people on the nodes thought that what they knew was the truth, but they could not see that above their heads, in the distant place, was the source of everything. Alas, tomorrow is the first day of the new competition system. I don't know what the elders of the Wuxia League are thinking, but they suddenly changed the competition system halfway through. Some people say that Wang Lu has been bribed, but looking at the new competition system, no matter how you look at it, it's us who have the advantage. Yeah, Dixian is also sick in the head. How could they agree to this kind of condition? One person in charge of all the events of the grand competition, does he think he is a great principal golden immortal? Even if he is a great principal golden immortal, it is impossible to suppress all of us in the Wuxia League in all the events. We have all seen the events designed by Taoist Master Wang Lu. If there is no special training in advance, no matter how great your ability is, it will be useless. Ah, are you talking about the ultimate enhanced version of the test? This is like seeing a ghost. I, your father, have read a lot of books. I can recite at least tens of thousands of books backwards, but I can't even get 30% of the points for that set of broken questions. Ha ha ha, you still have 30%, but I have done 3 sets, which adds up to 30% of the points. That's too disgusting. I'm afraid that even a real great principal golden immortal would have a headache doing that kind of thing. Moreover, under the new competition system, I think there are still a lot of events that are similar to the line test. How much ability does that tetragon have to suppress so many of us? I think he's just not clear-headed. It is said that the guy just resuscitation from his sleep not long ago. As soon as he woke up, he went crazy and launched a coup. They probably don't know how powerful the Wuxia League is. They really think that their Dixian players are invincible. But I heard that not long after she woke up, she traveled the 9 regions hand in hand with Taoist Master Wang Lu, especially the 5 super sections. If you say that she knows nothing about the current cultivators, then... Speaking of this, I heard that the relationship between Taoist Master Wang Lu and that senior gem emperor is extraordinary. The degree of intimacy seems to be between a man and a woman. Could it be that the root cause of the other party agreeing to this bizarre condition is here? Perfected Wang Lu is really good at taking drastic measures, tsk. That's right. Previously, many people were talking about how he didn't choose one despite having so many female confidants. So it turns out that he left the position for Dixian. This level of taste and realm is something that others can only look up to. The above dialogue could be seen everywhere in 9 regions today. The grand competition system was changed, and Tetragon fought against 10,000 enemies alone. This was the truth that most people knew. Most of the people here referred to the mortals who mingled in the city of immortals, the cultivators who came from low-rank sects, the cultivators with mediocre aptitude, and the loose cultivators who got the inheritance by chance. As for the reason behind this, there were different opinions. Above this, some cultivators who came from big sects got the truth further. That Tetragon is really a great person. After resuscitation, she found out that her companions had killed the people of the Wuxia League. She deeply hated them, so she exiled the murderer and shouldered all the burden on her own shoulders. This courage. Although she is a woman, it's better than countless men. It's just that, she is too inconsiderate. It's good that she is willing to take responsibility, but this kind of competition would only make people think that she is arrogant. She is, after all, the king of Dixian, so it's understandable for her to be a little arrogant. Moreover, after all, the grand competition has been simplified by 70 to 80%. Although there are many tricky and eccentric ones, there are more bright ones. Maybe she has the ability to win more than half of the projects and make us lose face. However, if she's a person who is easy to talk to, it doesn't matter even if we lose to her. In any case, Wang Lu has already taken drastic measures to take drastic measures. We're all family, ha ha ha. For most of the upper and middle-level members of the Wuxia League, this was the truth of the sudden change in the grand competition, which was also the version that Wang Lu and Hichu Daoren decided to announce to the public. This was an out-and-out artificial truth. However, even so, only a few people in the Wuxia League knew about it. In fact, this dissemination technique was very clever, because people at the bottom would never be satisfied with what they already knew. As they continued to explore, this version of the truth would gradually spread and become the truth that people believed in. Only a few people at the top knew that things were more exaggerated than most people thought. According to the requirements of Tetragon, the grand competition was basically over, and the past points and rules were completely invalid. Under the new competition system, there were no project restrictions at all. As long as it was not too boring and absurd, anyone could go on stage to compete with Tetragon. And the outcome was not determined by the sum of the points. As long as the Wuxia League could win one of these countless games, Tetragon would admit defeat on behalf of Dixian. The conditions were so good that people could not find any reason to refuse. However, because the conditions offered by Tetragon were too good, people worried that there was something hidden behind it. People who had contact with Tetragon would not doubt her ability and wisdom. Since she dared to offer such conditions, she must really have the confidence to suppress the entire Wuxia League by herself. Where this confidence came from was still a mystery to this day. Daoist Master Wang Lu, in your opinion, how much hope do we have in tomorrow's preliminary competition? In the conference room of the Heavenly Sage Hall in the City of Immortals, the last meeting before the competition was coming to an end. All the matters had been arranged. Early the next morning, Tetragon would appear in the central arena of Immortal One area, waiting for the challenge of the Wuxia League. In theory, anyone could come on stage to challenge. Tetragon did not impose any restrictions on the challengers. However, in fact, the Wuxia League certainly would not let anyone come on stage to waste time. From the very beginning, everything went according to the plan in an orderly manner. The one who made the plan was still Wang Lu, because in the Wuxia League, only he had the most contact with Tetragon and was most likely to make a targeted arrangement. The ones arranged by Wang Lu in the first round were Supreme Tian Luan, who was responsible for the chess competition, the witch Dr. A Wu, who was responsible for poison, and the god of food Lu Li, who was responsible for food tasting. These three people seemed to be randomly selected. There were men and women, and their cultivation base ranged from supreme level to peak king pill. However, in fact, the three of them had one thing in common: they were all winners in the grand competition with a huge advantage. In other words, they had reached the peak in their respective fields, unparalleled. They were the candidates with the highest winning rate that the Union of 10,000 Immortals could send out. Therefore, in theory, such a lineup was the limit that the Wuxia League could achieve, which was equivalent to a trump card and a killing move. However, at the beginning of the competition, people could not see through Wang Lu's intention. Therefore, after the list was confirmed, someone asked Wang Lu about the Wuxia League's chances of winning tomorrow's match. You asked me how much hope I have, and I would like to say 10%, but unfortunately, we are probably going to lose tomorrow's match. Wang Lu responded to the question with an indifferent look, and then said, "Be prepared for a long-term struggle. Tetragon is not such a simple opponent." With that, he got up and left the venue, no longer paying attention to the questioning behind him. In fact, even Wang Lu couldn't figure out how Tetragon could win under the existing competition system. She could not be omniscient and omnipotent, and crush the hundreds of millions of cultivators of the Wuxia League with her own strength. At the same time, with Tetragon's temper, she disdained the shady business of stealing chickens and dogs. Since it was impossible to defeat her, and there was no shortcut, how could she win? On the other hand, Wang Lu had long been ready to lose. However, even if he lost, he had to understand why. He arranged a very strong lineup for the first day of the competition. The purpose was to see what was the card in Tetragon's hand. In this contest with Tetragon, the biggest advantage of the Wuxia League was the large number of people. Because of the large number of people, they could safely and boldly send people to test the opponent. One day later, Wang Lu's eyes widened. I lost. In the central arena of Immortal One area, Supreme Tianluan left a sentence and got up to abandon his chess piece. In front of him, on a huge chessboard with hundreds of vertical and horizontal lines, the black and white camps were inextricably entangled. The black chess pieces were shaped like evil dragons, fighting left and right on the chessboard. The white chess piece was like a graceful fairy, deftly defusing the attack of the evil dragon with ease. The side holding the black chess pieces was Supreme Tianluan. On the chessboard, it clearly seemed that he had a little initiative. Several big attacks were initiated by Supreme Tianluan, and Tetragon hastily responded to the battle, struggling to cope with the situation. At this time, although the situation on the chessboard was roughly equal, people thought that Supreme Tianluan had the upper hand. Who knew that at this time, Supreme Tianluan abandoned his chess piece and admitted defeat, which was stunning. The chessboard with hundreds of vertical and horizontal lines was too complicated, so people couldn't understand why Supreme Tianluan lost, but, after all, he lost. Not bad. You've only made this move and you've already decided that you'll lose. I've underestimated you. Supreme Tianluan smiled slightly, cupped his hands to the other side of the chessboard, and then floated away. At the same time, the chessboard on the field disappeared, and the fierce fight between the black and white chess pieces came to an abrupt end. Next, come on. Tetragon put away the chessboard without showing the slightest tiredness on her face, as if the 4-hour contest with Supreme Tianluan just now was nothing to her. The second to play was the witch doctor, Wu. The girl looked dignified and walked into the arena with a full set of witchcraft equipment. She had a bunch of colorful feathers on top of her head, and her face was painted with blood-colored patterns. She held a black skull in her right hand and a lantern in her left hand. Her cultivation base was mediocre, but her witchcraft was inherited from the Great Desolation era. In terms of skill alone, her witchcraft was no less than that of those great witch doctors who could summon the wind and summon the rain in the Great Desolation era. In the case that witchcraft was generally lost, even Dixian would find it difficult to beat her in this way. In this game, the Wuxia League's odds of winning were actually higher than Supreme Tianluan's. After all, there were thousands of people who could play chess, but there were only a few who were proficient in witchcraft in the Great Desolation era. However, half a day later, the result of this highly anticipated game came out. Well, I admit defeat. The witch doctor looked at the pile of black powder in her hand with great regret. Not long ago, it was an ancestor's skull that contained infinite witchcraft power, but at this time, it had lost most of its magical power. Even if it was used as an ingredient to raise witchcraft insects, the quality was not good enough. An ancient witch treasure was broken by Tetragon in this game, destroying its magical power. Chapter 7:18. I'm not willing, but I admit defeat. At the dining table, Lu Li's beautiful eyes were red and she was about to cry. She reluctantly put down the jade chopsticks in her hand and turned to Wang Lu, sobbing softly, "Senior brother, I'm sorry." Wang Lu touched her head and said, "No need to say sorry. You've tried your best. It's not that you're incompetent, it's that the enemy is too cunning." With that, Wang Lu looked at Tetragon, who had turned around and was ready to leave. Tetragon was indeed Tetragon. He was so powerful in all aspects that it was hard for people to even look at his back. In the first match, she defeated the number 1 divine fortune teller in 9 regions, Supreme Tian Luan. In the second match, she defeated the witch doctor A Wu with witchcraft. In the third match, she defeated Lu Li as a food connoisseur at the dining table. Whether it was the amount of food or the subtle identification of food, her performance was flawless. Even the trick that Wang Lu used to defeat the food immortal was ineffective against her. Tetragon had no flaws at all. Losing to such an opponent could not be said to be Lu Li's responsibility. It could even be said that sending Lu Li to such a competition was a kind of cruelty in itself. Why make things difficult for Lu Li in a losing battle? But, hearing the comfort, Lu Li looked a little better. However, her pair of delicate eyebrows were still entangled, showing that she was still in a bad mood. But what? Wang Lu asked with concern. But I haven't eaten my fill yet. The match is over because the score difference is too big. Lu Li pursed her lips, swallowed a bit, and then looked at the kitchen. It is said that the final dish is Master Sun Buping's Chaotic Wild. I've seen it in the magazine, and I've been looking forward to it for a long time. It doesn't matter, I'll tell the chef to bring you the rest of the dishes. Wang Lu sighed, and inwardly, he felt relieved. At least little Lu Li didn't have a psychological shadow because of her defeat. Otherwise, he would have committed a great sin. 3 consecutive defeats in the first match of the first day. This result was too horrible to look at, but it was also within expectations. Therefore, the 3 people sent were also open-minded people who could put victory and defeat aside. Supreme Tian Luan had long calculated that today's defeat could be regarded as knowing his destiny. A Wu had an eccentric temperament and didn't care about winning or losing. Lu Li's mind was even more clear. When Wang Lu sent out the list of names, he had already taken it into consideration, so as not to leave a tragic sequela because of one failure. Now that Lu Li was safe and sound, the first fight of the day could be considered as a satisfactory end. Wang Lu smiled and turned to leave. On the other hand, unlike Wang Lu who had a face full of smiles, the 1 million spectators outside the arena were dumbstruck and speechless, and they were shocked speechless by the 3 successive defeats before their eyes. After a short moment, a wave of clamor broke the silence. People started to discuss animatedly, and there were even people who were extremely angry, shouting and smashing things in the spectator seats. Very quickly, the golden-armored strongman heard the news and rushed over. The emotions of the audience surged, and they fought with the strongman again. The scene was a mess. At the same time, no one knew how many streets in the City of Immortals had a similar situation. Through the broadcast of the signature version, the 3 successive defeats in the first match of the Wanxian League were seen by everyone. Thus, questions, curses, quarrels, were endless. Of course, all of this had long been expected. Not bad, the level of chaos is 20% lower than the highest expected value. It seems that I underestimated their self-control at the beginning. On the Dome of Immortal One area in the City of Immortals, a Shengjing sect elder gently stroked his beard and looked down at the chaos under his feet. He slightly nodded, and his magical power and true yuan, which were combined with his primordial spirit, gently surged and penetrated into every corner of Immortal One area to control the situation. This was, of course, the ability of deity stage. Self-control? I think I underestimated the fighting power of the golden-armored strongman. Unexpectedly, after entering the red alert state, there would be a stress array in the City of Immortals, which nearly doubled the attributes of all the strongmen. This 20% lower than the expected data was simply smashed by these strongmen with sledgehammers. Standing next to the old Shengjing sect cultivator was a young man. His magical power fluctuation showed that his stage was high-level King Pill. He looked like he was in his early 30s, with an unprepossessing appearance. His Shengjing sect robe appeared to be dusty, and his elbows were patched. He looked down and out. However, at this moment, being able to stand on the dome meant that his status was extraordinary. Each area of the City of Immortals was square and fully enclosed. However, there was actually open space between the areas, and only a few privileged people could pass through these areas. In addition to the high-level elders of Heavenly Sage Hall, there were also elite cultivators who performed various tasks for the organizing committee. To be able to be crowned as elite in the City of Immortals, they must be real dragons and phoenixes, and the tasks they performed were also of great importance. However, since it's not higher than the expected value, it's not our turn to make a move. This time, we can easily earn overtime pay. The old cultivator moved his muscles and bones and seemed absent-minded. His eyes occasionally glanced at his feet, which were full of contempt. A group of fools, do they really think that so many people in our Wuxia League can't beat a woman? Stupid. When the slovenly Taoist next to him heard this, he was also surprised. Idiot, do you really think you can win by relying on more people? You've clearly seen the 3 matches, yet you can't see the horror of Tetragon. Do you think we let her win? If the Wuxia League is as useless as you, even if there are 100,000 people, it would be useless. I'm afraid this 3 consecutive defeats is just the beginning. Thinking of this, the slovenly Taoist reached back and summoned his mount, a fat and ugly donkey. I'm not watching anymore, let's go. Everyone has seen the 3 matches today. And I followed up the whole process and observed closely. The conclusion is that Tetragon did not use any tricks. She won in a fair and square manner. There is no doubt about the result. In the deep hall, Wang Lu stood on the podium and stated his opinion in front of the elders from the major sections. This hall was the highest standard conference room arranged by the Heavenly Sage Hall in the City of Immortals. Those who could speak here were at least the most famous and powerful people. As for standing on the podium to preside over the meeting, it was a treatment that only the leaders of several super sects could have. Right now, Wang Lu had the support of Hichu Daoran and Feng Yin Daoist Master, as well as the acquiescence of the leaders of several other sects, so he could stand here as an exception. Because his opinion was really important. Wang Lu's words were concise and to the point, clarifying his point in one sentence. Soon, someone from the audience asked, "So, as you said, Tetragon's victory is fair and square. Doesn't that mean she is really omniscient and omnipotent, invincible?" On the first day of the 3 matches, Tetragon was not informed before the match. It was not until the players of the Wuxia League entered the field that she knew who was going to compete with her. In other words, it was impossible for her to make a target in advance, but purely to adapt to the situation. Then, she defeated the 3 strongest players of the Wuxia League in the 3 events. The first time was a coincidence, the second time was a coincidence, but the third time could only mean that there was something inevitable. Wang Lu nodded and said, "At present, I can only think that Tetragon is indeed omniscient and omnipotent. How can there be an omnipotent person in the world?" The person who questioned shook his head vigorously. Even those powerful people who have gone to the end of the immortal path and ascended to the upper realm are not really omnipotent in the true sense. Any of the 3,000 main paths in the world can lead to the highest realm, which is enough for people to study for life. Tetragon is just a Dixian who can't even ascend to the upper realm. How could she be omniscient and omnipotent? Can you explain my question? Wang Lu said, "Supreme Huiyuan, I can't explain your question because I don't understand why Tetragon is omniscient and omnipotent. But I think the right attitude to deal with a problem is to first admit the objective facts, and then look for theories that can explain and predict the facts. Instead of using existing theories to erase the facts. What we have seen with our own eyes is that Tetragon is invincible, so I don't think there's any need to dwell on this issue. What you see may not be the truth." Supreme Huiyuan continued to ask, "Perhaps she learned about our plan in advance through other channels and prepared in advance." Or perhaps she used some secret array in the City of Immortals to get a bonus in the competition. There are many possibilities, so we don't have to find the most uncomfortable one for ourselves. Wang Lu sighed and said, "We are now discussing countermeasures, not comforting each other. There are too many hypothetical conditions in Supreme's guess, and the value of acceptance is far less than my guess." "Very well, you are talented and always reasonable. Then tell me, since Tetragon is omniscient and omnipotent, why should we compete with her? Just surrender and admit defeat as soon as possible." Wang Lu sternly said, "Omniscient and omnipotent doesn't mean invincible. We still have a month, so there's no need to rush to admit defeat." After a pause, Wang Lu said, "In fact, through today's competition, I already have some ideas." Supreme Huiyuan said, "I'm all ears." Wang Lu cupped his hands toward Supreme Huiyuan and said, "Today's 3 competitions have all been competed in the grand competition. Although Dixian lost at that time, they must have learned from the painful experience afterwards and have new countermeasures. Looking at the present Dixian from the perspective of the past, it's normal for there to be deviations. They are the elites who walked at the forefront in the most glorious era of the immortal path. To put it bluntly, in terms of talent and wisdom, I'm afraid they are better than most of the people here." Supreme Huiyuan was silent and lost in thought. Wang Lu said, "So, I plan to arrange 3 new competitions, which have never been held in the grand competition, and we are sure to win. Among them, there is a comprehensive test of theory, a dishwashing competition, and a circus performance." After listening to the 3 events of Wang Lu, the audience was quiet for a while. "Wang Lu, your 3 competitions seem to be a bit too childish. Will the other party agree?" Wang Lu said, "Let's try it first, but I think the possibility of them agreeing is very high. She won 3 games in a row today, and her momentum is very high. With her temperament, she would probably consider pushing the boat with the current and go to a higher level. Winning makes us even more speechless. So, even if the events are a bit remote, she would probably agree and then try to beat us in these remote areas." "That makes sense." Wang Lu said, "Moreover, the 3 competitions tomorrow will also verify my guess." "Guess?" Wang Lu sternly said, "Actually, from my point of view, I don't want to believe that Tetragon is really omniscient and omnipotent. Not to mention whether she can do it or not, it doesn't make sense in terms of necessity alone. She regards herself as the Emperor of Dixian. Have you ever seen an emperor who is proficient in everything? It's enough to ensure that there are proficient talents in each field. She herself needs to be proficient in imperial power. Tetragon's omniscience and omnipotence seems a bit superfluous. Of course, the 3 competitions today are about arithmetic, poison insect, and food tasting, which can barely be considered as the life of an emperor. So, it's reasonable that she is proficient in them. But if she is equally proficient in the 3 competitions tomorrow, it would seem too superfluous." Supreme Huiyuan said, "Isn't that what I said? And if she is really so omnipotent, what are you going to do?" Wang Lu said with a smile, "Of course, I will find out the secret of her omniscience and then try to imitate it. As you said, although Tetragon is strong, there have been many cultivators who are stronger than her since ancient times. So, if she can do it, maybe we can do it too." Chapter 719. It's unexpected. It's really unexpected. Holding the freshly made test paper in his hand, Wang Lu, as the examiner, was beaming with joy and constantly praised. He drew on the test paper with a cinnabar pen, writing praises. However, beside him, the faces of several elders who were marking the test paper with him were obviously livid, and their veins were bulging. What's more, they subconsciously burst out in anger and ignited the examination room, causing a group of junior cultivators to be in a hurry to put out the fire. "It's a mess, what a scandal." An old examiner shook his head and sighed, feeling sorry. He turned over the thick test paper in his hand again and again, only to see the dense handwriting on the paper. Each question had an extremely detailed argument and solution, the train of thought was clear and organized, and every stroke was filled with the author's deep thoughts. Although it was just a test paper with answers, it was like a delicate work of art. However, after holding the work of art for a long time, the old Taoist finally let out a long sigh and tore it into pieces. Someone around him advised, "Don't be angry, immortal Wan. Your eldest disciple, immortal Jianmu, has answered very well. Such a tricky test paper can finally get 60% of the score, which has far exceeded most of the examinees. It's not a waste of the wisdom of your Heng Shui sect." The old Taoist looked defeated. However, in the end, he lost to that tetragon. The person who tried to persuade him said with a wry smile, "Tetragon is the emperor of Dixian. His talent is all around and unparalleled. Not to mention your Heng Shui sect, even those arrogant cultivators of the 10,000 arts sect returned in failure. Their score is not as good as Jianmu." The old Taoist raised his head with some excitement. "But the cultivators of our Heng Shui sect have never lost to anyone in the test paper. Whether the opponent is a human or an immortal. This is the foundation of our Heng Shui sect." Alas! The person who tried to persuade him had nothing to say. The people of Heng Shui sect had always been extreme on this issue. 30 years ago, Xueba, the eldest disciple of Heng Shui sect, and Taoist priest Tian Shu of 10,000 arts sect made a bet on the shore of the Sea of Books. In one night, the two of them read half of the books in the Sea of Books, and then each said a question. One asked and one answered. The two of them fought for 3 days and 3 nights. Finally, Taoist Master Xueba won by one question. However, when he returned to the sect, his primordial spirit was exhausted, and he vomited blood and died. Although Taoist priest Tian Shu lost the competition, he was enlightened and broke through the limits of the nascent soul and soul formation stage. In the eyes of most people, the real winner of that competition was undoubtedly Taoist priest Tian Shu of the 10,000 arts sect. However, for the Heng Shui sect, Taoist Master Xueba was a model worthy of great admiration, because he had the Heng Shui spirit. He would never lose to anyone when it came to questions. He was willing to pay any price for it. Now, although Taoist Master Jianmu had defeated the talents of the major sects in the Wanxian League, he was completely defeated by Tetragon. How could the people of Heng Shui sect bear the defeat in the examination? Old Taoist Wan gritted his teeth. This matter is not over. When I go back, I will let all the disciples in the sect do a closed-door training. If we don't thoroughly understand this set of questions and defeat Tetragon, we will never come out. The people next to him were shocked. Taoist Master, you must calm down. This matter must not be reckless. It's incredible that Tetragon can do this set of questions with more than 90% correct rate. And Taoist Master Jianmu has been training for a full 6 months, and he is the best among many contestants. His correct rate is also 60%. During this period, the gap can't be made up by closed-door training alone. Old Taoist Wan's eyes were firm. There is no difficulty in the world that cannot be overcome by hard work. Any difficult problem must bow down to the sea of questions tactic. The reason why Jianmu can't defeat Tetragon is that he hasn't done enough questions. When I go back, I will send him to the Sea of Questions boat to travel for 10 years. I don't believe that he can't beat Tetragon. After 10 years, the grand competition would have been over, okay? Old Taoist Wan still insisted, but Tetragon must still be alive. He is Dixian, with a long lifespan, so he won't die so easily. At that time, I will let Jianmu come and take revenge. Very well, whatever you want. For such a strange idea of a strange sect, people wanted to persuade it, but they couldn't. However, from another point of view, to be able to make such an extreme and strange sect helpless. Tetragon's strength had indeed reached an incredible level. Even in such an unorthodox project as the conduct test, she had an overwhelming advantage over the union of 10,000 immortals. This kind of test was personally set, organized, and graded by Taoist master Wang Lu. As for the test, this strange form of test had gradually become popular in 9 regions in the past 100 years. In the hands of Wang Lu, it had been greatly improved, which could effectively test the examinee's intelligence level and ability to handle affairs. However, in order to cope with the grand competition, Wang Lu increased the difficulty of the test thousands of times, which was close to unimaginable. In order to show fairness, before the start of the grand competition, Wang Lu, through the planning book, handed over the questions and examples of the conduct test to the ancient Earth immortals. However, at the same time, he also handed over a large number of teaching books to the Union of 10,000 Immortals for more targeted special training. As for the process of setting the questions and grading the papers, naturally, it would not be faked, because in theory, it was unnecessary. The Wuxia League had the upper hand, so they should not lose. Unfortunately, the facts were in front of them. Even Taoist master Jinmu of Heng Shui sect had lost. Who else could win? Perhaps Wang Lu could do it, but the questions were set by him, and he had to grade the papers. How could he be allowed to take the test? Well, everyone, don't be depressed. Yesterday, we lost 3 times in a row, so what's the point of losing the first match today? Just when everyone was in doubt, Wang Lu clapped his hands and said something that was not comforting at all. After that, he left his desk, walked into the arena, and spoke to the crowd as the host. Next, prepare for the next match. Led by the chief mate of the 16-night villa, who is the best at housekeeping service in the Wuxia League, a total of 37 people will participate in a dishwashing competition with Tetragon, the leader of the Dixian League. With that, Wang Lu spread out his arms. Suddenly, there was a clanging sound, and a mountain of various bowls appeared in the middle of the arena. In the blink of an eye, a suffocating stench filled the entire venue. In the cleaning team, several young girls who seemed to be in their prime shook slightly, and their expressions changed. There are a total of 3 million bowls here. As you can see, they have been stained with all kinds of filth, and the stench is unbearable. Your task is to clean these bowls within a limited time. The person who cleans the most bowls wins. Gentle reminder, these bowls are made of different materials, and the pollutants are also different. You need to adapt to the local conditions to clean the filth. In addition, there are a few bowls with hidden filth. If you don't find them and treat them as clean bowls and put them together with other washed bowls, it is likely to cause large-scale pollution, and all previous efforts will be wasted. So, it's time to test your housekeeping skills. Let's wait and see who can clean these bowls most accurately, carefully, and quickly. Wang Lu's hosting speech was concise and to the point, and he flashed away after saying that. A group of maids and maids were left behind, rubbing their hands and looking at the mountain of bowls. As for Tetragon, he looked at Wang Lu's back with great interest. Dishwashing competition? You actually dare to let me, the head of the Dixian, do such a lowly thing? Are you really bold, or have you already seen something? Just as Tetragon was muttering to himself, the chief mate of the 16-night villa had already taken the lead and rushed to the mountain of bowls. In 2 steps, she had put on a full set of equipment, a mask, a scarf, gloves, and a white apron. She waved her hand, completely disregarding the stench and filth, and picked up a porcelain bowl from the mountain of bowls. With a glance, she could clearly see the filth in it. Then, a stream of clear spring water gushed out from her palm, swirled in the bowl, and dissolved the filth in it. With another turn of her hand, the white bowl was placed on a small table. Several female cultivators looked at it with envy and admiration. The bowl just now, as well as the filth in the bowl, were not simple. The bowl was made of white jade lotus porcelain, and the bowl was like a lotus flower, and ordinary oil stains could not be stained. To be able to leave dirt in the bowl, it had to be a special item. According to their visual observation, the black fog glue residue in the bowl was extremely sticky and insoluble in ordinary liquids, making it very difficult to clean up. To exaggerate, without a cultivation base of Shudan or above, there was no way to clean the black fog glue. However, the disciples of the 16-night villa only used a stream of clear spring water to clean it. The clear spring water was obviously not an ordinary product. It should be a special detergent produced by the sect, and its effect was really extraordinary. And only the 16-night villa, which focused on housekeeping services, would have this special product. However, those who were sent to participate in the competition were all outstanding in the field of housekeeping. Dozens of other female disciples showed their magical abilities, picking up the dirty bowls from the mountain of bowls and quickly cleaning them up. Their movements were extremely fast, and in the eyes of ordinary people, they could only see afterimages. Not long after, a clean mountain of bowls was piled up around these disciples. During this period, Tetragon never made a move. He just watched the efforts of others as a bystander, as if he had no interest in participating at all. The time given by Wang Lu was not long, only half an hour in total. Based on the number of dirty bowls and the difficulty of cleaning them, if most people did not make any mistakes, they could clean thousands of bowls. For example, the elites of the 16-night villa could clean more than 20,000 bowls. Of course, for the mountain of 3 million bowls, it was still a drop in the bucket. So, to take the trouble to prepare so many dirty bowls, did Wang Lu deliberately leave some extra, or, at this moment, Tetragon finally moved. She only made 2 movements. The first movement was to stretch out her right hand and raise it slightly. Thus, the entire mountain of bowls was lifted up by her. The second movement was to separate her left and right hands, and then suddenly struggle. As a result, the entire mountain of bowls buzzed and trembled, and countless fine dirt swarmed out from every corner of the mountain of bowls. They were stripped from the bowls by an invisible force, gathered, and then quickly lifted into the sky. In an instant, there was an extra dark cloud in the sky. But at this time, a stream of fire flew from the horizon, instantly igniting the entire cloud and dyeing the sky blood red. Shrouded in blood, the entire mountain of bowls fell down under the effect of gravity. Bang! There was a muffled sound. The mountain of bowls fell to the ground, shaking the ground slightly. However, this was far less than the shock in the hearts of the people who watched the whole process. What happened just now? While everyone was in turmoil, Tetragon did not wait for anyone. Well, I'm done washing. Can this farce end now? With that, Tetragon turned his eyes to the top of the arena. Wang Lu had been waiting there for a long time. "Ha, you are indeed the omniscient and omnipotent head of the Dixian. Your Majesty's skill is invincible and eye-opening. But today's competition schedule is tight, so I won't waste any more time. Next, the circus performance, please." Chapter 720. Do you think the people of the Beast Master School will cry? In the Immortal 5 area, in the courtyard that belonged solely to Wang Lu was a little bored as he turned the pen in his hand and asked the secretaries around him. Several of the secretaries were temporarily transferred from the Heavenly Sage Hall and were not familiar with Wang Lu's working style. In the face of this question, they were suddenly tongue-tied and did not know how to answer. Just thinking of the scene that happened not long ago. Probably, someone from the Beast Master School will cry. The chief secretary, Hai Yunfan, sighed. It's really too miserable. In the field where she settled down, she was played like a monkey and lost face in front of millions of people. I'm afraid that the group of cultivators who participated in the competition will not be able to get rid of their inner demons in the next 10 years. I didn't expect Tetragon, who was quite gentle in the first few matches, to suddenly turn hostile. Wang Lu smiled. It's normal. The 3 matches on the first day, everything was fair and above board. On the one hand, she needed to show her absolute crushing strength, on the other hand, she couldn't lose the leniency of the emperor, at least to contrast with Black, who had previously killed her. So, of course, she deliberately showed mercy. However, in today's 3 matches, the first match can barely be regarded as an intelligence test. From washing the dishes, it was clear that I took the opportunity to flirt with her. It would be strange if she didn't slightly punish me. After Wang Lu explained, the cultivators in the room suddenly understood, but soon some people realized a deeper layer of content, and could not help but widen their eyes, revealing a look of disbelief. Hai Yunfan was still straightforward. So, you have long expected this result? Wang Lu said, it can't be said that I have long expected it, tetragon is not so easy to guess. However, if you flirt with others, of course, you have to be prepared to be turned hostile. This result can't be said to be unexpected, ha ha ha. In the end, it was intentional. How much hatred do you have against the Beast Master School? Wasn't it when you were a Shudan? In any case, you are now the enlightened King Pill. Why do you need to remember the past so clearly? Wang Lu waved his hand. If I had a grudge against the beast-taming school, it would have been too easy for me to torment them with my power over the past 6 months. You're right. Hai Yunfan thought for a moment and then understood. According to your plan, there must be a school that touches this bad luck, and beast-taming school can be considered to be at the right time. That's right, Wang Lu said. The sages said, do not shun one's relatives, do not shun one's virtuous person. I'm just following the saint's words. Hai Yunfan sighed. You are so shameless. You will become a saint sooner or later. After a pause, he asked again, by the way, regarding the secret of Tetragon's omniscience and omnipotence, did you discover anything? Wang Lu said, I vaguely have some ideas in my heart, but today I watched the match for the whole day and did not find any evidence to prove my conjecture. Tetragon probably understood that I was using these tricks to test her, so she hid her cards very well. The only thing that is clear is that under normal circumstances, she would not be so omnipotent as she is now. Hai Yunfan frowned and asked, not under normal circumstances. Then do you think she cheated? Tetragon is proud and arrogant. She would not do that kind of shady business. At most, she resorted to trickery. No, even trickery is not in line with her temperament. However, I can feel that the contents of today's match were disdainful of her from the bottom of her heart. She considers herself an emperor, so of course she disdains mastering lowly skills. But she has mastered them, and her mastery is even better than those professionals. If this isn't cheating, what other honorable reason can there be? At this point, the answer seemed to be on the verge of being revealed, but it seemed to be covered with a layer of veil, making it hard to see clearly. This feeling of being one step away from success was the most depressing and unbearable. Hai Yunfan thought hard at his desk for a long time, but still gave up helplessly. Although there are many guesses, according to the current conditions, there is no way to make further deductions. Wang Lu said, yes, the information is limited, and it is meaningless to just think about it, so, it is time to collect some new information. An hour later, on an isolated island with whistling wind and thick fog, Wang Lu sat on the ground and ended a long story. Then he took a sip of tea to moisten his throat and said, this is the reason why I came all the way to visit you. Regarding Tetragon, I think no one here knows more than you, who are also Dixian. So, can I trouble you to tell me, what is the secret behind Tetragon's omniscience? In front of Wang Lu, a woman with a worried expression sighed helplessly, just to ask this question, you took the risk to come to the broken world to find us? Have you ever thought that if Tetragon finds out that you are here? Wang Lu said, so what if she finds out? She has a grudge against you, but what does that have to do with me? I am just an insignificant third party. As an emperor, Tetragon shouldn't be so petty, right? Xian Mo laughed bitterly, of course she wouldn't make things difficult for you because of our friendship. But, you are the one who took the initiative to find out information that you shouldn't. Forget it, since you are already here, there is no point in trying to persuade you. If you want to hear it, then I will say it. Wang Lu nodded, I am all ears. Actually, it is very simple. Your initial thoughts were not wrong. Xian Mo said softly, no one in this world is omniscient and omnipotent. The Tao ancestors of the Great Desolate Era all have their own specialties and their own Tao. They are not omnipotent. Of course, Xian Mo is not an exception. However, even though there is no omniscient and omnipotent individual in this world, there is an omniscient and omnipotent team. And her ability is to borrow the strength of others for her own use. So, when needed, she is omnipotent. Borrow the strength of others for her own use? Wang Lu frowned slightly and muttered, so that's how it is. This makes sense. Borrowing the strength of others is indeed a trick, but it is also an honorable method. Tetragon considers himself an emperor, and an emperor, using others for his own use is indeed a matter of course. Everything under the heavens belongs to the emperor, and everyone under the command of the emperor is the emperor's servant. Thus, the strength of one's subordinates is one's own strength, so what's the harm in borrowing it? No wonder she dares to stand out and challenge our Wanxian League alone. It turns out that the real battle with us is the entire Dixian camp. This girl is so scheming. After sighing, there was a question, this kind of person, what role did she play in your camp in the past? Her character and ability are so domineering, how did she get along with your boss peacefully? Xian Mo sighed again and said, although Tetragon was a little headstrong and self-opinionated in the past, she was not as ostentatious as she is now. As for her relationship with boss. Now that I think about it, it is indeed a little strange. When boss was around, she was very low-key, and never had a dispute with boss. In the past, we all thought it was because of boss's personality and personal prestige, but now it seems that there may be other reasons. Wang Lu said, you can just say that she bullies the weak and fears the strong. Tetragon is not such a despicable person. On the battlefield, she has stepped forward many times to fight against the strong enemy, and sometimes even took the initiative to put herself in danger. I sincerely admire her courage. Oh, so your boss's personal charm is off the charts, so much so that even Tetragon, this kind of egotistical person, would willingly bow down to her? Unfortunately, she has reverted to her old ways, and none of you can suppress her. Speaking of which, let me ask another sensitive question. Wang Lu paused to make sure that Xian Mo was listening to him carefully, and then said, in my observation, although Tetragon is headstrong and self-opinionated, she is broad-minded and has amazing courage. Especially compared with you guys, the contrast is even stronger. I still remember that when you guys just woke up from your sleep, when you saw us, the later generation cultivators, you immediately clamored that we were incompetent and not worthy of being entrusted with the inheritance. You even planned to turn the tables and become the masters of 9 regions again. Then there was the grand competition. However, Tetragon, on the other hand, after realizing the weakness of the later generation, she thought of taking the initiative to provide help and shelter for us. In my opinion, Tetragon is much kinder and gentler than you guys. So, why did such a gentle person yell at you guys as soon as she woke up? She can even tolerate us, a group of strange younger generation cultivators, but she can't tolerate you guys, her comrades and compatriots? After hearing this question, Xian Mo was silent for a long time. She obviously had the answer in her heart, but it was not convenient for her to say it out loud. It doesn't matter, you don't have to force yourself to answer. Your current expression has already given me a lot of information. With that, Wang Lu stood up and glanced around the isolated island. Then, she pointed out something and said, you guys are obviously still being exiled and chased by Tetragon, but it seems that you guys are not united, but fighting separately. I have been talking to you for so long, but I haven't seen a third person. Well, it's getting late, I should go back. I hope that the next time we meet, it will not be in this gloomy and secret place, but in the sunshine. Xian Mo reluctantly squeezed out a smile. I hope so. Chapter 721. Time flew like an arrow. Unknowingly, it had been half a month since Tetragon appeared on the stage for the first time in the Immortal One area. In the past half a month, this kind of thing happened every day in the City of Immortals. Of course, the most important thing was undoubtedly Tetragon's undefeated feat in the Wuxia League. In the past half a month, the arena in the Immortal One area was full of people every time. The audience that could accommodate millions of people was at least twice as crowded. The grand competition, which was originally distributed in countless venues throughout the city, was now concentrated in one place. The once spectacular arena had become narrow. However, compared with the enthusiasm of people from all walks of life in the City of Immortals, the record of the Wuxia League was really terrible. In the past half a month, they were defeated again and again. During this period, they couldn't even make a comeback. Of course, at this time, people didn't know that according to the agreement between Tetragon and the Wuxia League, as long as the Wuxia League could win even one match, it would be a complete victory. However, the current situation was too embarrassing and ugly. During this period, the Wuxia League had to deal with protests from all sides. In the face of people's angry questioning, they had to find excuses to shirk. At the same time, they had to constantly consult with the association to discuss new public opinion measures. Trifling matters like these left everyone in a terrible state of anxiety. And Wang Lu, who was in the center of the vortex, was the first to bear the brunt. The problems that needed to be solved by him piled up like a mountain every day. However, for the secretaries who worked with Wang Lu, their life in the past half a month was orderly, and the pressure was far less heavy than it seemed to others. Because Wang Lu looked very relaxed. In the past half a month, even if something big happened, it was difficult to see even the slightest bit of worry on his face. It was as if he had a well-thought-out plan, and when he began to deal with the problem, he was also methodically. With such a leader taking the lead, even if the work was busy and tense, it would not be tiring. In this regard, the secretaries were really convinced. Among them, even the ones with the worst backgrounds were geniuses and elites from mid-rank sections. They were the center of attention in their sections. However, at this time, these sect elites had put down their cultivation because of a single order from the organizing committee to deal with all kinds of low-level chores with Wang Lu. In fact, this could easily arouse the frustration and injustice in their hearts. However, after witnessing Wang Lu's working attitude, they had to admit that they were impressed. Wang Lu's way of doing things might not be the most brilliant. There was no lack of talents among the secretaries who were good at handling documents and handling affairs, but his mentality and boldness were hard to be compared to. He is just a king pill cultivator who has been cultivating for no more than 30 years, but he is calmer than most of the perfected cultivators in the Heavenly Sage Hall. In the past half a month, the organizing committee has been under so much pressure that many seniors and elders are worried, but Wang Lu is always as gentle and calm as a spring breeze. In fact, the reason for his calmness was simple. Wang Lu had long given up on this match. At this point, it doesn't matter whether I win or lose the grand competition. This sentence was what Wang Lu said to himself half a month ago. So far, he had only mentioned it to a few people, not even to Hichu Daoran. Because at this time, the grand competition had affected countless people. Although the form had changed dramatically, in most people's view, no matter how the form changed, as long as they won, the Wuxia League could fully accept the Tombs of Immortals and get the support of Dixian. The immortal cultivation world of 9 regions would enter a new golden age. Not many people could resist such a temptation. People's desire was like an unstoppable torrent, which could only roll forward naturally. During this period, anyone who tried to stop it would be crushed to pieces. Of course, Wang Lu didn't want to be crushed to pieces, so he still did his superficial work in an orderly manner. And in the face of public doubts, such as why he refused to participate in the competition in person for half a month? Why did the previous unstoppable momentum suddenly disappear? Was it because of his personal relationship with Dixian? And in case of a failure, what should he do? Wang Lu's uniform answer was, no comment. In fact, in the past half a month, the focus of Wang Lu's work had long changed. Tetragon. Of course, Tetragon was actually the focus of the entire Wuxia League. However, while the Wuxia League was thinking about how to defeat her, Wang Lu was thinking about how to further understand her. Of course, from another perspective, no matter who won the match, as long as they could defeat Tetragon, the result would be the same. However, what Wang Lu thought was even further than this. The more he knew about her, the more Wang Lu found that she was a wonderful person. There were so many secrets hidden in her that people couldn't help but want to unravel them. For example, the first secret: what was Tetragon doing in the past half a month? In most people's view, she appeared on time every day in the Immortal One area, won the competition in succession with unpredictable means, and suppressed the entire Wuxia League. But in Wang Lu's view, Tetragon was clearly absent-minded in the past half a month. Although she did appear on the field, her mind had long drifted outside. It was a pity that her ability to borrow supernatural power was too strong. Even if she was distracted, she was still invincible on the field. In the past half a month, she defeated countless masters in a row. This absent-mindedness was well hidden. If Wang Lu hadn't traveled hand in hand with her and had a certain understanding of each other, it would have been difficult to find the abnormality. And a few practitioners with good eyesight in the Wuxia League might have seen something unusual, but they might not dare to believe their own guesses. On such an occasion, she dared to be distracted? How many people would believe such a thing? Wang Lu would. He was now very curious about what Tetragon was thinking. Secondly, what was the principle behind Tetragon's ability to borrow other people's supernatural power? How could she casually use other people's things? How could there be such an overbearing supernatural power in the world? Even if she was the king of Dixian, and the whole world belonged to the king, there must be a premise: the person whose supernatural power was borrowed must recognize her royal power. And if this was the case, in the past half a month, many of her victories were very thought-provoking, because the supernatural power she borrowed was really strange. Thirdly, Tetragon's attitude towards Xian Mo and the others was a bit unreasonable. As for Xian Mo and her group of exiled opposition members, they were obviously feeling a little guilty. This made people even more curious. What were they feeling guilty about? Did they do something wrong, or did they have an accident? At the same time, more than half a month ago, when Tetragon had just been resuscitation, his overbearing power left a deep impression, and his posture when he killed Gisaurus with his bare hands was really powerful. But after that, Tetragon stopped and never chased after the rebels in her eyes. What was the reason? Was it because he was injured at that time and consumed too much energy? Fourthly, the question that extended from Tetragon's secret was, what was Black doing? As the biggest enemy of the Wuxia League before Tetragon's resuscitation, Black once received the highest level of attention from Wang Lu. He led a team of secretaries headed by Hai Yunfan to conduct a comprehensive analysis and research on Black, and determined this person's ability and threat. But after Tetragon's resuscitation, Black fled with serious injuries and stopped. Although it could also be explained that he was seriously injured by Tetragon and could not act freely. However, Wang Lu always felt that with Black's means, he should not have lost so quickly and so thoroughly. And if he was secretly brewing a comeback, then his existence must not be ignored at this time. Black was likely to become the core of the next change in the situation. The above 4 questions were the focus of Wang Lu's thinking for half a month. Of course, there was no conclusion at present, but Wang Lu had found some clues. In the next half a month, he believed that he should be able to find some answers. No matter how good or bad the world was, life always had to go on, and business always had to be done. For the businessmen in the City of Immortals, this sentence was the best portrayal of today. After the change in the form of the grand competition, the ones who were most affected were actually these businessmen. Although those contestants were the most directly impacted, their daily training basically remained unchanged. Although most of them could not appear on the stage, in the current situation, it was a good thing that they did not appear on the stage. Only the businessmen seemed to have been struck by a bolt from the blue. The organizing committee issued an order to greatly change the format of the grand competition, but how could the businessmen recover their early investment? Of course, the organizing committee would not make any compensation. Of course, there was also a reason for not making any compensation. When businessmen took advantage of the grand competition to make money, the organizing committee did not raise the price of taxes and rents. Now that the situation had changed and the business lost money, naturally, there was no reason to make compensation. Wasn't the risk and benefit of doing business coexisting? After enjoying the benefits before, now it was time to take the risk. Of course, at any time, there would always be a few geniuses among businessmen who could go against the current and make a lot of money when others lost. For example, a large business that had recently risen in less than a few months, once again became the winner who had the last laugh in the astonishment of countless people. Boss Shu, this time, your shop is going to become the #1 shop in the City of Immortals. When the new shop opens, don't forget to invite your brothers for a drink. What are you talking about, Boss Ma? You are a highly respected senior, don't flatter me to death, while the businessmen were toasting each other. Shu Si was suddenly in a trance. He felt that everything in front of him was so unreal. The fat old Ma, who was trying to flatter him, was a famous big shot in the business under the mysterious Sky Mansion. He was born as a mortal, but he had a firm foothold in the immortal cultivation world. Now, with the help of a 12-layer spirit root powder and a steady stream of medicinal pills, he had become a Taoist master of King Pill, which made countless cultivators envious. Accompanying old Ma was Wen Fangbua, a businessman who was once insufferably arrogant in the City of Immortals. He had 2 daughters who were as beautiful as fairies, and each of them had a good marriage. However, now his business was in jeopardy, and even the marriage contract had been returned. He was really dispirited. Fortunately, old Ma was loyal enough to reach out and pull him up. Now, at the banquet, he had become a guest. And he had become a big shot who was qualified to drink at the same table with many celebrities and rich businessmen. And this was just because he had been acting honestly according to someone's instructions. Dead face, you, who the hell are you? Let me tell you, the worship girl Sheng Jianri, after unremitting efforts, finally got out of Richelieu. Here is the metaphysics formula, 40050650130. Good luck to everyone. Chapter 722. Humph, you're drunk like this again. Do you really think you can do whatever you want now that you've reached the foundation establishment stage? When Shu Si returned home, he seemed to hear the familiar voice saying unfamiliar words. Suddenly, his heart warmed. However, he soon realized that all this was just the side effect of the famous wine, drunk and dreaming, the real projection of people's innermost desires. However, in fact, Dead Face never said any words of concern to him, not even the concern hidden under the reprimand. He was always as cold as ice. Even if they were master and disciple, there was no trace of master and disciple warmth. However, Shu Si was still grateful to Dead Face. Without Dead Face, what kind of boss Shu was he? He was just a libertine that could be seen everywhere in the streets and alleys. And he had seen the end of these libertines since he was a child. Most of them died without a burial place and their corpses were exposed in the wilderness. However, now he was the leader of several major trading companies in the City of Immortals, a veritable noble. Xu Si was well aware that all of this was a gift from Deadface. Without him, he might not even be able to operate a small shop, let alone seize several key business opportunities and make huge profits, so that he could rise to the top of the business world and live a luxurious life. In addition, Deadface also taught him cultivation method, which, combined with the power of elixirs, allowed him to reach the foundation establishment stage in just a few months of cultivation, which made many people praise him for his outstanding talent. Nonsense, how could he have any talent to speak of? However, in the final analysis, he didn't have much affection for Deadface either. At first, when he was still curled up in the small shop, he was deeply grateful to him. However, as the business grew bigger and bigger, the gratitude in his heart became less and less. Instead, his confusion and panic became deeper and deeper. Why? Deadface was so good to him? There might be hatred for no reason in the world, but there was no love for no reason. When a person showed kindness to the other party, there would always be a demand. Even if the rich gave alms to beggars, it was also for good reputation and self-satisfaction. Of course, there was nothing wrong with this, but there must be a reason for all good deeds. This point was most deeply felt by him at today's banquet. When the wine was drunk, several wealthy businessmen at the table sighed with emotion at old Ma's righteousness and kindness. In the past, he had only known Wen Fangbo for a little while, but he had extended a helping hand when Wen Fangbo was at his weakest, pulling him out of the abyss. However, under the table, there were businessmen who were familiar with the situation who privately told Xu Si that old Ma had indeed saved Wen Fangbo's life, but it was definitely not because of old friendship. Old Ma wanted Wen Fangbo's 2 daughters. Of course, this was a reasonable request. Old Wen's 2 daughters were as beautiful as flowers and jade. Who didn't want them? It was a pity that they had all been betrothed to the disciples of famous sections. Although old Ma was not afraid, there was no need to find trouble for himself. But now that the engagement was broken, old Ma's help was like pushing a boat with the current. Does this count as taking advantage of others' difficulties? Perhaps, but it was also a fact that old Ma had saved people from disaster. In the eyes of the businessman, the huge family business was obviously more valuable than his 2 daughters. Therefore, although there were some private discussions, they also admitted that old Ma had done a good deed. He was indeed loyal and kind. When Xu Si heard this, he had mixed feelings. Is this loyalty and kind? Perhaps he was born at the bottom of society, so his values were different from theirs. Even if he was a wastrel who was used to sneaking around and going back on his word, he wouldn't think that it was righteous. However, it also made Xu Si understand a principle. There was no love for no reason in the world. Deadface gave him everything. What was he after? Lustful like old Ma? If Deadface was really interested, there was no harm in giving it to him. Unfortunately, Xu Si knew that he really didn't have that condition. Was it just because he had received a gift from Wang Lu? Even if Deadface was a loyal follower of Wang Lu, he wouldn't do things to this point. If he stood in front of the stage, with his achievements today, it would not be difficult for him to meet Wang Lu. Why did he push everything to him? The more he thought about it, the more worried Xu Si became. Deadface could give everything, and he certainly had a way to take it all away. As for himself, could he still adapt to the life of losing everything? He was used to living a luxurious life, and he was used to being presentable in front of people. Especially. In the past few days, he had met a lot of rich girls and gradually fell into the land of gentleness. If he suddenly lost all of this? Just as he was thinking about it, a cold snort came to his ears. In an instant, Xu Si regained his sobriety, and the distracting thoughts in his mind disappeared. At the same time, a smile appeared on his face. Deadface, Before he finished speaking, he was unexpectedly interrupted. Starting tomorrow, we will operate according to the new plan. Xu Si was taken aback. There's a new plan? This change is too fast. With that said, he took a few steps into the room and saw a new booklet on the table. When he looked at it, he was surprised again. This. I don't care about the others, but what's with this one? Increase the investment in Luo Xiao? Didn't you give up on him a long time ago? Why do you suddenly think of him at this time? There's no investment value at all. And even if you're optimistic about him again, it seems too eager for quick success and instant benefits if you change it now. You. Xu Si kept asking a series of questions, but unfortunately, Dead Face refused to answer even a word more. Sigh. Forget it. Whatever you say, I'll let my men do it tomorrow morning. However, at this moment, Dead Face's voice came again. You go and meet him in person. Xu Si was surprised. Dead Face, what the hell are you doing? Do you need me to go in person for this kind of thing? Luo Xiao is already past his prime. There's no need for me to go in person, right? Well, even if he's past his prime, he's still a disciple of Shizhou Jin. I can't compare with him in terms of status, but it's too sudden to go and meet him. Well, I'll go. Knowing that Dead Face's decision could not be questioned, Xu Si nagged for a while and then shut up. Whatever he asked him to do, he would do it obediently. The previous few key business opportunities were also done under such unimaginable circumstances. After dealing with the sudden attack of Dead Face, Xu Si climbed into bed with a smell of alcohol. Before he fell asleep, his heart was slightly at ease. Although he was assigned a difficult task, it was more reassuring than before, when he was given everything without saying a word. Oh? Cooperate with me? In the residence of the Four Elements sect, Luo Xiao was a bit surprised and looked at the visiting guest with some interest. Xu Si. Although he had just stepped into the world of immortal cultivation, in many people's view, this young man had gradually become a pivotal member of the City of Immortals. Of course, in terms of status, Xu Si was far from being comparable to him. However, for these businessmen, what was important was the investment value, not the identity status. And when it came to the investment value, what was worthy of a personal visit from him, a new star who was past his prime? To be honest, even Xu Si didn't understand this problem. Dead Face asked him to come, but he didn't explain what he wanted to do, which was really confusing. Therefore, he had to adapt to the situation. Yes, cooperation. As Xu Si said that, he racked his brains to think about how to cooperate with this bald man. Born in Stern Flower School, he gradually showed his talent from obscurity and overflowed with talent. Then he was accepted as a successor disciple by Shizhou Jin and had several fights with Wang Lu. Although he was at a disadvantage, he showed excellent strength, and then, after that, there seemed to be nothing worth mentioning. Originally, he was expected to show his talent in the grand competition, but as a result, the format of the competition changed and he lost the opportunity to play. It was said that he was depressed because of this. Wait a minute, if that was the case, Xu Si's mind flashed and he thought of one thing. I hope to cooperate with you and get you a chance to play again. Oh? Luo Xiao seemed to be interested. Why do you want to do that? Xu Si said, because you have investment value. No matter what others say, you are, after all, the most outstanding member of your generation, and also a very legendary one. Moreover, you have an advantage that others can't match. Compared with those geniuses who have been selected and cultivated by famous sects since childhood. You relied more on your own hard work to rise to power, and this point is actually more appealing to the general public. Moreover. Upon hearing this, Luo Xiao smiled and said, moreover, the cost of investing in me is relatively low, isn't it? Xu Si said. Please understand, I am, after all, a businessman, right? No problem. Luo Xiao waved his hand and didn't care about his low cost. However, just when Xu Si thought it was okay, he heard Luo Xiao say, "Thank you for your attention to me, but unfortunately, I have no intention of participating in the grand competition." Upon hearing this, Xu Si was stunned. "Huh? Recently, I have something urgent to do and will soon be in seclusion. I'm afraid I can't cooperate with others. So, thank you for coming today, but unfortunately, I can only decline your invitation." With that, Luo Xiao got up to see the guest off, not giving Xu Si a chance to respond. "You mean, he claims that he has something important to do and can't participate in the grand competition?" Xu Si said helplessly, "Yes, and after saying that, he drove me away, not giving me a chance to play at all." Inside the room, Dead Face was rarely lost in thought. Xu Si's heart suddenly hung up. Things had already come to this point. Could it be that Dead Face still refused to give up? How attractive was this Luo Xiao that he was worth being so persistent? I say, since he is so uncooperative, we don't have to shamelessly curry favor with him, right? Wouldn't it be strange for outsiders to see it? So, not only do you have to continue to invite him, but you also have to invite him with great fanfare so that everyone in the City of Immortals knows about it. As for the reason, just think of it as buying a horse's bone with 1,000 gold to buy people's heart. You are a rookie in the City of Immortals, so it's reasonable to use this to buy people's heart. Huh? Dead Face, who exactly is that Luo Xiao to you? Aren't you being too kind to him? Little mouse, after this, I will give you freedom. Xu Si was startled. What did you say? After this, I will go on a long journey. I'm afraid I won't be able to see you again for decades. So, you don't have to worry about me taking everything away from you anymore. Xu Si was taken aback. What nonsense are you talking about? Everything I have is given by you. If you want to take it away at any time, if I even frown, I will be struck by lightning. My soul will fly away and scatter. Oh, that's nice to hear, but are you really willing to give up the glory and wealth today? Are you willing to give up those gentle girls? Very well, even if I'm a little reluctant, I never want you to go. What should I do without you? How can I manage such a big business with my little ability? Except for a few key decisions, I never told you what to do, and you still did a good job. Now, you just have to be at ease and live a life of wealth without worry. Xu Si was stunned for a moment. Somehow, he felt more and more frightened. When Dead Face was there, he respected him and feared him. But if Dead Face was gone, the fear in his heart would only be stronger. But what about my cultivation? Oh, you always don't like cultivation. Xu Si suddenly seemed to be choked. Do you really want to go? After this, you and I will separate. So, do this well. Xu Si was silent for a long time. Although I don't know what you want to do, since it's your request, I will do it no matter what. Chapter 723. Recently, the City of Immortals has become deserted. In the restaurant, a wine guest held a wine pot and gently shook it. His eyes looked out through the window, and the corner of his mouth evoked a playful smile. Across the table, a Taoist in coarse clothes coldly said, "Deserted? There are more and more people in the City of Immortals." After a pause, he said, "Not only people, but also evil spirits." What kind of evil spirits can hide from your eyes? The wine guest sneered and took another sip of wine. Even if some evil sects come in, they're probably evil spirits and monsters. These days, I haven't seen them carry out terrorist attacks at all. It's really boring. The Taoist across the table frowned. You called me here just to complain about these boring things? Ha ha ha, of course not. As the supervisor of Xingjing's sect, how could I delay your time for boring things? This time, I invited you here to ask something. Of course, it's not for nothing. Today's dishes and wine on the table are on me." The Taoist frowned and looked at the table. There were 3 empty wine pots, all of which were eaten by the wine guest. A plate of peanuts was also eaten by the wine guest, and he didn't taste any of them. At the same time, there was only a pot of rough tea and a half-full teacup in front of him. Did he spend so much effort to call him over just to invite him to drink such a cup of free tea? He was indeed the famous bitch in 9 regions, the record holder of the Wuxia League's lower limit. "Wang Wu, if you have something to say, just say it." However, Wang Lu is the chief planner of the organizing committee, so he has a rich source of information. "What do you want to know?" "Just ask him, why do you have to go far?" The wine guest across the table was Wang Wu. "Supervisor, you think too highly of him. When it comes to intelligence, who can compare with the 9-region supervisor of Xinjing sect? The famous former number 1 king pill in 9 regions, Taoist Master Kong Zhang. The Taoist in coarse clothes invited by Wang Wu was Kong Zhang of Xinjing sect, an unknown but influential Taoist master of King Pill. The former number 1 king pill of the 9 regions, this title is really ear-piercing. As Kong Zhang spoke, his gaze pierced forward like a sword. However, this seemingly corporeal gaze seemed to sink into a void of chaos, unable to exert any force. Kong Zhang chuckled and withdrew his gaze. This simple exchange had indeed revealed an insurmountable gap in strength. There was indeed an insurmountable gap between the current number 1 king pill of the 9 states and the former number 1 king pill. "What do you want to ask? Speak." Wang Wu put down the wine pot and pondered for a moment. "I want to know, in your opinion, what important things have happened in the City of Immortals these days?" Kong Zhang couldn't help but laugh. "What a good question." The City of Immortals was so big that there were countless things that happened every day. The competition in Immortal 1 area alone was the focus of attention of tens of thousands of people, which was worth writing about. However, Wang Wu probably didn't call him over to ask about those things that everyone knew. In fact, she had Wang Lu as her disciple, so it was not difficult for her to know any information, but it was difficult to find useful information among the thousands of information. An average person wouldn't be able to sift through the information and organize it well. And this was the irreplaceable place of the 9-region supervisor of Xinjing sect. After thinking about it, Kong Zhang said, "In my opinion, there are a few things worth mentioning in the City of Immortals in the past few days. First, Wang Lu left the City of Immortals several times and went deep into the whirlpool of stars to meet with Dixian. The initial speculation is that he met with Tetragon." Before he finished speaking, Wang Wu nodded and confirmed the news. Yes, he went to see Tetragon. It seems that he wanted to use the beauty trick to seduce her, but he failed shamefully. Kong Zhang pondered for a moment and decided to filter out Wang Wu's nonsense. The only thing that could be confirmed was that Wang Lu met with Tetragon. In addition, in the past few days, there are more unclean things in the City of Immortals. Wang Wu immediately became interested and asked, "What is it?" Kong Zhang shook his head and said, "At present, I can't find any clues. The other party's skill is quite high, and I'm just intuitively judging it. Since the 9-region supervisor can't find any clues, could it be someone from the demon sect? No, I remember the stench of the demon sect very clearly. But now, I can only say that these are unclean things, but I can't tell what they are at all." After a pause, Kong Zhang said, "I'm not even sure if these unclean things really exist." Well, in the current situation of the City of Immortals, it's not surprising to provoke anyone. 9 regions is vast and boundless. Maybe there are hidden powerful people who came to watch the fun. Kong Zhang nodded and said, "That's also an explanation, but I can't feel at ease if I can't figure out their identity." "Very well, is there anything else?" "The third thing is, Xu Si, the owner of Qing Feng Enterprise, has been asking to see Luo Xiao for several days in a row, wanting to cooperate with him, but Luo Xiao closed the door and refused to see him. Wang Wu was stunned and said, "What is this? You even care about this kind of folk gossip? I'm familiar with Luo Xiao, but who is Xu Si? A new rising star in the business world." Kong Zhang patiently explained the origin of Xu Si to Wang Wu. A very interesting person. After listening to his story, Wang Wu was also curious and said, "How is this interesting?" The number of businessmen floating in the sea of business is like the grains of sand in the Ganges River. Every day, there are people who rise, and every day, there are people who jump into the river. This kid's ability to try his luck is good, but is it worth it for you to talk about it alone? For ordinary cultivators, a business that controlled huge resources in the immortal cultivation world might have considerable weight. However, in the eyes of the supervisor of Shengjing sect, even if a businessman was 10 times stronger than Xu Si, he was still just a businessman. Xu Si himself is not worth mentioning. What's really interesting is the person behind him, a blank person. A blank person? Kong Zhang said, "I can find out his appearance, his cultivation base, and his every move in the City of Immortals. But before entering the City of Immortals, his record is blank. And in this world, there is no real blank person. Even if it's your sex Wang Lu, at least I know that he was born in Wang family village and has a very wonderful inheritance." Speaking to this, Kong Zhang once again looked at Wang Wu with his sharp eyes. Unfortunately, he still didn't get any response. He continued, "But I can't find out the origin of the person behind Xu Si." Wang Wu shook the wine pot and said, "With the means of the supervisor, if you really want to know something, there will always be a way. Unfortunately, when I noticed him, he was no longer a target that I could make a move on at will. With the cover of Qing Feng Enterprise, I can't make a move on him at will. I have observed him. Although his origin is unpredictable, he is not an enemy that needs to be dealt with by fair means or foul." "I see. So, speaking of which, what do you think is wrong with this guy instructing Xu Si to see Luo Xiao?" "I don't know." Kong Zhang said bluntly, "I can't see the problem, but I can't figure out the reason why he deliberately went to see Luo Xiao. The reason given by Qing Feng Enterprise is to buy a horse's bones with 1,000 gold, but I don't believe it." Wang Wu didn't understand. "And then? Even if you can't figure it out, it's not a big deal in the end." Kong Zhang said seriously, "Things that I can't figure out have the value of taking seriously." "Very well, you're really confident. Is there anything else important after that?" Kong Zhang thought for a moment and said, "The fourth thing is that you called me here." Wang Wu smiled and said, "Don't worry, I don't like you, so you don't have to worry about your chastity." Kong Zhang said, "But there must be a reason. What did you find?" "Sure enough, I said that if I look for you inexplicably, I would definitely be suspected. Fan Air, that big-breasted brainless girl, wanted me to try. She said that you might be naturally stupid." Wang Wu sighed and said, "In short, there is a girl in my family with a particularly keen intuition. She said that something might happen in the City of Immortals recently. I asked a few people, but they all felt puzzled, so I had to ask you." Kong Zhang pondered for a moment and said, "You said Fan Air, is she one of those women who suddenly appeared in the City of Immortals together with Yu Jiao of Song and the others? I just want to ask you, what is their origin?" "I have checked." "Oh, just take it as a woman's secret." Wang Wu said, "I guarantee that they are all good girls. Each of them is a pure and kind girl." Kong Zhang couldn't say a word for a long time. The guarantee made by the #1 bitch in 9 regions was too convincing. "Very well, I can put down the matter of these people first. But, if there is any new situation on your side, remember to contact me in time. At least we can confirm each other." Kong Zhang didn't ask much, but he had already trusted the intuition of Fan Air. Because this was the guarantee of the current number 1 king pill in 9 regions. Wang Wu thought for a moment and nodded. Okay. Thereupon, Kong Zhang picked up the teacup and drank the last half cup of tea. Finally, I also have a question for you. With your character, you rarely take the initiative to participate in these things. You usually avoid them. Is there any reason why you have to do it this time? Hey, this is a big thing related to the safety of the people in the City of Immortals, why do I have to do it as a last resort? Wang Wu was somewhat dissatisfied with the other party's attitude. Kong Zhang was a serious person. When he heard this, he honestly replied, because even if you do this kind of private work, no one will give you money. Wang Wu finally had nothing to say. After a long silence, she stood up. Inspector, you still don't know me. After leaving the restaurant, Wang Wu smiled gently, looked up at the sky, and whispered to herself, even if no one gives me money, don't tell me I won't ask for it myself. Wang Lu, that bitch, has so much money in his hand, but he doesn't take the initiative to share it with me. At the same time, on the other side of the City of Immortals, the big boss of Qing Feng Trading Company, who was young but had a net worth of billions, Boss Xu Si, who could rival a country, was striding heroically on the road to a hidden residence. Looking at his expression, it was as if he was going to the execution ground. Alas, the ancient sages have a beautiful story of 3 visits to the thatched cottage, but I have visited 10 times in a row in 3 days. Even after people have moved, I still pester them. I'm afraid I will be called a pervert in the future. While talking to himself, Xu Si knocked on the door of a small courtyard and was ready to welcome another round of closed door. This was the new residence that Luo Xiao moved to yesterday. Previously, he was harassed by Xu Si every day in the 4 Elements sect. Last night, he moved at night. Unfortunately, he was still seen by Xu Si's men. To be precise, this behavior was indeed no different from that of a pervert. However, unexpectedly, this time, the door opened. Luo Xiao appeared behind the door with a somewhat helpless and somewhat amused face. You're really persistent. Xu Si resisted the excitement and joy in his heart and cupped his hands. However, before he could speak, he saw Luo Xiao waving his hand, come in and talk. Xu Si quickly followed him. Along the way, he followed Luo Xiao to the inner room. Along the way, he looked around and saw that the courtyard was simple and dusty. It seemed that the owner of this place had no intention of living here for a long time. It was more like a refuge. Thinking of this, Xu Si couldn't help but smile bitterly. Master Luo Xiao, this is really not what I want, but for the sake of dead face, I have no choice. I will definitely compensate you for your mental loss in the future. While thinking, Xu Si followed Luo Xiao into the house. However, as soon as he stepped into the door, he saw a person that shocked him. A person who looked exactly like him. Then, he heard the last sentence of his life. It doesn't take any effort to get here. Seeing that chaos was about to break out, 3 golden-armored warriors descended from the sky and suppressed a few cultivators who were rubbing their fists with invisible pressure. However, similar scenes could be seen everywhere in the City of Immortals. Although the golden-armored men were loyal to their duty, their number was limited, and there were always places where they could not stop it. This caused the order in the City of Immortals to become increasingly chaotic. However, compared with the worst expectation, the current situation should be quite good. There was no large-scale, organized riot. Although the management of the organizing committee of the Grand Competition of the Union of 10,000 Immortals was questioned, it was not challenged. After dispelling the hostility, people still rationally believed that Wang Lu should still have the cards that could turn the tables. Of course, all of this was under the deliberate guidance of the organizing committee. As early as when Tetragon proposed to change the format of the competition, Wang Lu led the organizing committee to design a full set of public relations programs to control public opinion and guide people's hearts, and to ease and stabilize the situation as much as possible. Now it seemed that the effect of public opinion work was good. The most important point was that, although it was difficult for people to accept the successive defeats of the Wuxia League, they could reluctantly accept the successive victories of Tetragon. In short, people had a good impression of Tetragon. This was, of course, the role of the public opinion tool. The cultivators of the Wuxia League had no chance to personally contact Tetragon. To understand her, in addition to witnessing her invincible heroic and domineering appearance on the field, they could only listen to other people. As the most familiar figure in the City of Immortals in the past month, the story of Tetragon had been widely circulated. It was said that she was omnipotent. In ancient times, she was one of the top figures, who once made thousands of immortals bow their heads. It was said that she was kind-hearted, noble, and admirable. It was also said that she was a national beauty. Under the purple atmosphere of the emperor, her figure and appearance were flawless. These stories were, of course, fictitious. It was true that Tetragon was omnipotent, but the one who really made thousands of immortals bow their heads was someone else. As for being kind-hearted and noble, that was even more of a joke. Although Senior Gem Emperor had the breadth of mind and boldness of an emperor, she was too decisive and ruthless in her actions. She had the appearance of a tyrant, which had nothing to do with benevolence. She also disdained the name of benevolence. As for being a national beauty, it was a matter of opinion. For some people, the appearance of a budding girl was an irresistible temptation, but for more people, it was still an unripe sour fruit. The organizing committee used these fictitious stories to appease people as much as possible. But at the same time, even in the eyes of the organizing committee itself, this was tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. The truth would always be exposed. Tetragon was not a cultivator under the Wuxia League, so she had no obligation to cooperate with their fictitious propaganda. Once the truth was exposed, just thinking about it made people restless. However, the person who personally directed all of this seemed to have no pressure at all during this period of time. As the chief planner of the organizing committee, Wang Lu basically handed over the daily work to the secretarial team headed by Xiaofan. However, there was only one thing that he had to do every day, skipping work to fish, and his whereabouts were mysterious. Of course, Wang Lu also had a good reason: he was on a business trip due to an important matter. As for where this business trip went, even the chief secretary, Xiaofan, was vague. As for what the important thing was, no one knew. Of course, Wang Lu did not seriously conceal his whereabouts. There were countless capable people in this new city, so even if Wang Lu wanted to hide it, he could not. Therefore, there were still some people who knew his whereabouts. In the whirlpool of stars, in the depths of the group of immortal tombs. However, only a few people knew that Wang Lu went deep into the group of immortal tombs to visit an unexpected person. Tetragon. Of course, people did not expect this candidate. Because Tetragon had to play at least 3 to 4 matches a day in the City of Immortals, and the duration of the matches was getting longer and longer. Out of the 24 hours in a day, at least 16 hours were spent in the arena. And Wang Lu's whereabouts were uncertain, most of them were at the same time. In theory, it was impossible for them to meet each other. In fact, there was, of course, a problem. As Wang Lu initially guessed, although Tetragon was invincible in the arena, she was actually absent-minded. Because the Tetragon in the arena was just her avatar. Tetragon's real body had always been in the whirlpool of stars. On this point, if Wang Lu had not personally gone to the whirlpool of stars and seen Tetragon's real body, even he could not be completely convinced that Tetragon really had the courage to use an avatar to fight against the Wuxia League. However, after meeting her, Wang Lu realized that it was not that Tetragon was bold, but that she had no choice. She had more important things to do than to suppress the Wuxia League in the City of Immortals with her own strength. The whirlpool of stars to kill the rebels. When Wang Lu ventured deep into the whirlpool of stars for the first time, he happened to encounter Tetragon fighting against Gisaurus. The girl fought against 3 enemies alone, and the Emperor Purple Chi in her hands was ever-changing and had infinite magical abilities. In the end, she managed to severely injure 3 raging world dragons with the strength of immortal beasts, and forced them to flee in panic. After defeating Gisaurus, Tetragon naturally found Wang Lu and questioned his purpose. "I'm here to deepen our understanding and friendship." Of course, this excuse could not fool him. Seeing that Tetragon's eyes flickered and seemed to have a murderous intention, Wang Lu had to turn over a card. "Xuan Xian and Xian Mo are your people, right?" After this sentence, Tetragon's face changed slightly. She reached out and stirred the river of stars, causing countless bright stars to shatter and destroy, and then drew out a dead silent area to surround the 2 of them. Then, she looked at Wang Lu solemnly for a while. "How do you know? Xian Mo told you?" "She shouldn't have the guts." Wang Lu said, "I don't need anyone to tell me. I can guess it. You used their magical ability in the competition, so of course I know they are your people." Tetragon frowned slightly and said, "You know I can borrow other people's magical ability? But, just based on this? This reason is enough. It's impossible to borrow magical ability without restrictions. Otherwise, you would not have lost to them that year if you directly borrowed the magical ability of the fallen immortals. According to my speculation, the biggest possibility is that the original owner of the magical ability needs to be willing to let you borrow it. The whole world belongs to the king, but the people in the king's land have to be obedient people to pay taxes. If they are traitors, you can't get any benefits from them." Tetragon could not help but sneer and said, "Whimsical. But it's not unreasonable. You guessed it right, my Emperor Purple Chi does have such a restriction. However, based on this, I'm afraid you can't conclude that Xian Mo and Lu Biechen are my people, right?" Wang Lu said, "Your performance in the competition is too arrogant. Using Xuan Xian's technique to win against Tian Luan, using Yin and Yang division to win against 16 Knights Villa. I'm not blind, of course, I can see it clearly." "Ha, you're sharp." Tetragon declined to comment. "Then, what did you find?" Wang Lu said, "Since I guessed that those 2 people are your people, I naturally want to know why you are so ruthless to your own people." Tetragon lightly said, "Maybe it's because I'm a tyrant. Can we talk about something nutritious?" Wang Lu sighed and said, "Can we respect each other's IQ?" "Ha ha 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 ha." Tetragon laughed loudly and looked very happy. "Tell me, what else do you know?" Wang Lu said, after thinking about it, "I think the most likely thing is that there is a traitor among you. You let the 2 of them use the trick of injuring themselves to gain the confidence of others." Tetragon's smile suddenly disappeared, and his cold eyes swept over like a sharp blade. "This is not something that can be joked about. So even you have to deal with it carefully, for fear of making the slightest mistake. You let Xian Mo, Lu Biechen, and perhaps others use the trick of injuring themselves to gain the confidence of others and expel them together with the one you suspect. You constantly put pressure on them, forcing them to work together during this period, and then expose the real traitor." Tetragon nodded. "Your guess is somewhat reasonable." Wang Lu smiled slightly and said, "Of course, if there's a deeper speculation, perhaps you don't even trust Xian Mo and Lu Biechen. Otherwise, you don't need to expose your cards so quickly in the City of Immortals. Although you are used to covering up your true temperament with the attitude of a tyrant, I think you are at least a meticulous person and would not be so careless in doing things. And if it's intentional, then I'm afraid 2 things can be inferred from this." Then, in the increasingly serious eyes of Tetragon, Wang Lu stretched out 2 fingers. First, you have doubts about Xian Mo and Lu Biechen, so you blatantly used their magical abilities in the competition, not hesitating to expose their identities. Second, you deliberately did it for others to see, but that person is not me, because it makes no sense to show it to me. In other words, you think there are traitors in the city of immortals. Hearing this, Tetragon's face finally completely changed. Chapter 725. Who else did you say those words to? Of course not to others at will. What if I'm killed by you? Tetragon chuckled and said, smart. But, for a smart person like you to come to me today and show all your cards, what do you want? Wang Lu said, it can be said that it's curiosity, or it can be said that I'm not willing to be a spectator. Try to stand in my point of view. Even the king of Dixian has to go through a lot of trouble and even beat around the bush to deal with the enemy. If I turn a blind eye to it, wouldn't that be the road to death? Tetragon was silent for a moment and then said, you guessed it right, the opponent is very powerful, even I can't deal with it at will. But because of this, you should act according to your ability and avoid getting yourself involved in the whirlpool. I'm not kidding when I said that I would protect you. Wang Lu said, a monarch does not joke, of course I know that. But, frankly speaking, I think you can't even protect yourself, so how can you protect us? Moreover, even though our overall cultivation base is not as good as that of our predecessors, we also have irreplaceable advantages, so we don't necessarily need your protection. Don't look disapproving, do you really think that you're so strong that you can win in the City of Immortals? If I didn't throw the game, you would have already lost. Ha ha ha. Tetragon laughed again. Wang Lu, your joke is funny. But, if you're serious, I'd like to hear how you throw the game. Wang Lu lightly said, the competition has been going on for more than 20 days, and I've always been a spectator. Isn't that the biggest throw the game? Do you want to say that if you personally make a move, you can beat me? Wang Lu nodded and said, that's right. If I personally make a move, you would have been defeated. Tetragon was silent for a while, but still couldn't help but laugh. Are you serious? Do you really want to win against me, a cultivator with King Pill? If it was your master, it would be a little more serious, but if it's just you. Alright, since you're so confident, then come and try. Before he finished speaking, Wang Lu had already stepped forward and made his move. The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi went straight for his face. Zhong Xingming's heaven-splitting divine sword is indeed powerful, but without a cultivation above the soul formation stage, the divine sword is just a formless form. How dare you use this sword to fight me? As she spoke, Senior Gem Emperor stretched out a finger and pressed her fingertip against Rouge Tears. Her delicate fingertip bent the immortal sword Rouge Tears slightly. The body of the sword twisted and groaned in pain, as if it was about to break. One sword, one finger, the difference in strength was like the difference between clouds and mud. At this moment, Tetragon did not use his true strength as a Dixian. She restrained her power within the level of King Pill, separated a trace of her ocean-like immortal spirit into a core, and then fought against Wang Lu with the same level of King Pill. There was no level limit in the competition in the City of Immortals. However, at this time, Tetragon strictly suppressed his own strength and did not use the power of Dixian. If they wanted to fight, they would fight according to the rules that were favorable to them. If they won, they would be convinced and have nothing to say. This was not only the generosity of the Emperor, but also a trace of preferential treatment that Tetragon gave to Wang Lu. Wang Lu unceremoniously accepted Tetragon's preferential treatment. After the first sword strike failed, he made another sword strike. Unexpectedly, he held two swords in his hands. This sword strike was very fast and very hidden. The sword light was completely covered in the shadow of Rouge Tears, but its power was not much inferior to that of the immortal sword. However, as if he had foreseen it, Tetragon's other hand just happened to be in front of the sneak attack sword, so that it could not move. 2 fingers easily stopped Wang Lu's 2 thunder-like sword strikes. Wang Lu's face gradually turned red, and his whole body's true yuan boiled like lava as he continued to output power. However, Tetragon looked indifferent and at ease. It was simply a crushing disparity. The strength of Tetragon had far surpassed that of any other Dixian. As a contestant of the grand competition, after a long period of training and strengthening, Wang Lu's strength had more than doubled compared to before the grand competition. He was also at the peak of King Pill, but the peak was different. Now, he had the strength to compete with the general Dixian in King Pill. However, in front of Tetragon, everything seemed to return to the starting point. Trying to compete with me with brute force. Wang Lu, you're too irrational. I'm very disappointed. With that, Tetragon raised his eyes and the virtual King Pill with the immortal spirit energy spun wildly, releasing countless golden threads, which spread out from her body and weaved into a huge net that wrapped her up tightly, like a cocoon. Calm down, I have considerable expectations for you. Tetragon said and sighed slightly, and a trace of disappointment flashed through her eyes. She indeed had high hopes for Wang Lu. Although the strength of this young cultivator was not strong, his resourcefulness was ever-changing, which was often refreshing. Tetragon had long decided that after he unified 9 regions, he must give Wang Lu an important position so that he could display his talent. That would be a more substantial position than the chief planner of the organizing committee. At the same time, she would also try her best to help Wang Lu improve his cultivation base. With the means of Dixian, coupled with Wang Lu's amazing void spirit root, his strength would certainly advance by leaps and bounds. If she used the secret treasure in the depths of the group of immortal tombs, it would only take him 30 years at most, or even a few years at least, to let him enter the threshold of Dixian. However, now it seemed that her expectations for him were too high. Although Wang Lu was talented, he could not avoid some common problems of young people, hot-headed and gambler's mentality. Could it be that he couldn't think of the gap in strength between the two sides? However, he still wishfully chose to use force. Did he really think that he could have a good chance of winning? Although, the sharpness of his sword was indeed beyond her expectation. As Tetragon thought about it, she raised her right hand. On the tip of her jade-like index finger, there was a drop of blood that was particularly eye-catching. Unfortunately, after all, he was still too tender. Tetragon shook his head, put these thoughts out of his mind, and prepared to continue to deal with the matter of Gisaurus. However, at this time, there was a sudden cracking sound behind him. Tetragon's complexion changed dramatically. Wang Lu, are you crazy? The giant white cocoon was formed by Tetragon's immortal spirit virtual King Pill. It was like an extension of her body and had a very keen sense of touch. Wang Lu was trapped in the cocoon, and his every move was under the control of Tetragon. Therefore, Tetragon immediately discovered what Wang Lu was doing. He blew up the King Pill. After more than 30 years of cultivation, the King Pill that carried Wang Lu's entire immortal cultivation path exploded in the young man's indifferent smile. The King Pill, which was stronger and more indestructible than any metal, was torn apart by the powerful explosive force. At this moment, even the knowledgeable Tetragon couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Wang Lu surprised her again by making an absolutely unexpected choice. He blew up the King Pill? Was it necessary? This wasn't a battle to the death. Was it necessary to disregard his own future and even his own life for a mere victory? Even if he used the power of the King Pill to escape, and even won this match, was it really a victory? He couldn't even calculate the basic gains and losses. How could she rest assured to hand over the more important responsibility to him? In that instant, Tetragon thought a lot, and at the same time, she did one thing. She dispelled the cocoon so that the power of Wang Lu blowing up the King Pill could be released, otherwise, the violent power would be sealed in a small space. Even if Wang Lu could survive the backlash of blowing up the king pill, he would still be torn apart by the violent power. Although Tetragon was disappointed with Wang Lu's performance, she wouldn't sit by and watch him die. The many lines of defense that Tetragon had set up in front of him were designed with the king pill level Wang Lu as the standard to ensure that Wang Lu would not be able to break through even if he was twice as strong. However, Tetragon did not expect that Wang Lu would be able to break through. In the face of the nascent soul sword energy, these lines of defense were vulnerable and were pierced in an instant. There is indeed no chance of winning against you with brute force, so I have to use my brain. Wang Lu smiled and said, "Now, are you willing to admit that you are not so omnipotent?" Chapter 726. A lot of things, before it happened, no matter how one thought about it, it seemed impossible. However, when it actually happened, when one looked at it from another perspective, one would feel that it was nothing strange. King Pill was broken, Yuanying came out. Wasn't this normal for Wang Lu? He had been at the peak of King Pill for some time. For ordinary cultivators, this period of time was very short, far from enough to complete the accumulation of breaking through the bottleneck. However, for Wang Lu, how could there be so many troublesome bottlenecks with Void Spirit Root? What's more, Wang Lu was the lead disciple of Lingjian School and also served as a senior leader of the organizing committee. He had so many resources in his hands that many large immortal cultivation sects felt sincere envy. And with such a huge amount of resources, could it not pile up a Taoist master of Yuanying stage? Wang Lu could have reached Yuanying stage a long time ago. The reason why he stayed at the peak of King Pill was nothing more than to cope with the grand competition. Under the special competition system, he who was at the peak of King Pill was more useful than a low-level Yuanying. Now that the grand competition was over, Wang Lu no longer needed to suppress his cultivation base. Thus, the King Pill was broken and Yuanying came out. Everything was logical. And Wang Lu also took this opportunity to plot against Tetragon. It's really an eye-opener for me. Tetragon also sincerely exclaimed. Although, strictly speaking, she could not be regarded as losing. On the contrary, Wang Lu's Yuanying sword in the King Pill level competition was the real problem. However, was Tetragon a person who fussed over every little thing? Wang Lu did not mention that she suppressed her cultivation base in the competition. It was she who took the initiative to restrain herself. And it was Wang Lu's own ability to break through in the competition. In particular, it was commendable that she, who had the magical ability of Swan Xian, did not feel any abnormality before the competition. Therefore, when the purple sword Qi touched the center of her forehead, Tetragon was willing to admit defeat. The emperor could afford to lose and let it go. Wang Lu smiled. It's just a small trick. It's not worth mentioning. But I think this sword strike is enough to prove one thing: you are not as omniscient and omnipotent as you think. There are blind spots in your thinking, so in the face of the fallen immortals, you will need help from others. Tetragon was silent for a while, obviously thinking about this. After a while, she looked at Wang Lu and asked, "Can I trust you?" Wang Lu said, "At this time, there's no need to ask such a meaningless question, right?" Well said. However, you better think about it carefully. My trust in you is very heavy. Wang Lu took a deep breath. It's fine. Good, your courage is commendable. Tetragon smiled and nodded. Tetragon gently smiled and said, "Sun Buping is my Taoist companion." Wang Lu was silent for a while and felt that this answer did not seem so unexpected. Especially considering the slightly strange attitude of Xian Mo when talking about the relationship between Tetragon and that person. In fact, he should have already guessed some clues. Only this answer could perfectly explain all the characteristics of Tetragon. Moreover, the name Sun Buping. When he carefully chewed it, he felt that it had endless charm. It was just 3 words, but it made Wang Lu in a trance see such a situation. He was the leader of Dixian, the most amazing cultivator in that era. Although he stayed in 9 regions, he had the absolute strength of a true immortal. However, this true immortal, who was not inferior to the Earth immortal, never chose to ascend to the immortal world. Instead, he stayed in 9 regions. In order to protect all living beings, he waved his sword and declared war on a group of fallen true immortals. This was, of course, a war with no chance of winning. Any one of the opponents was the most powerful existence in 9 regions. The ascension that hundreds of millions of cultivators in 9 regions diligently pursued was just the starting point of true immortal. The 2 sides were simply the existence of different worlds. However, Sun Buping still chose to stand on the side of 9 regions. Because of the injustice, he drew his sword to follow his heart. Even if there were thorns everywhere, he would still move forward bravely. Tetragon actually found a good husband. After gently shaking his head, Wang Lu came back to his senses and asked, "Did you inherit his legacy?" Upon hearing this, Tetragon sneered and said, "Why do I need to inherit anyone's legacy? It's just that before he went to sleep, he entrusted the burden on his shoulders to me. As a couple, I will do one last thing for him. When this matter is over, I will no longer have anything to do with Sun Buping." Wang Lu was startled and said, "You're quite open-minded. The dead are gone. Although I was very happy when I was with Sun Buping, since he is dead, I will never fall into his shadow." Tetragon said with a smile, "Speaking of this, shouldn't you give me an answer about the marriage?" Wang Lu suddenly coughed and said, "Well, I'm afraid I still need to think about it." "Think about it?" Tetragon asked, "Do you still have room to think about it now? After knowing so many secrets, you should think about your own safety, right?" Wang Lu inwardly exclaimed, "What the f***ck? Is this a naked threat?" In fact, he had expected that knowing too much would not end well. However, the secrets that Tetragon said just now were really hard to resist listening to. As a result, the evils that he brought upon himself were the hardest to bear. Gossiping was good for a moment, and the Dixian was lying on the bed. Although Tetragon was indeed a great person, and Wang Lu quite agreed with him and even had a deep impression of him. But he was not willing to marry her. In a flash, Wang Lu racked his brain to think of a way to refuse this absurd marriage. "Well, I don't care about this, but you should consider it seriously. If a dignified earthly immortal were to form a marriage alliance with a mere golden core realm." "Oh, no, a nascent soul realm cultivator like me, isn't it too absurd? The gap between Dixian and Yuanying is bigger than the gap between a human and a dog. If you and I marry, it's tantamount to sexual intercourse. I'm afraid it would not be tolerated by the heaven and earth." Tetragon disagreed. "I've seen many examples of cultivators and spirit beasts combining, so what if it's sexual intercourse? Don't you have 2 spirit dogs on Spirit Sword Mountain? And more than 20 years ago, when you were attracted by the mountain spirit in the Grand Cloud Mountain, did you ever consider the difference between sexual intercourse and sexual intercourse? What the hell, you even dug out that kind of private matter?" Tetragon said, "Xian Mo and the others have always attached great importance to you. They have carried out quite in-depth excavation of you, and their evaluation of you is very high. I was skeptical about this, but now I believe it. You are indeed not a person who completely belongs to 9 regions." Wang Lu's heart thumped. "Not belonging to 9 regions? Do you want to send me to the Western continent?" "Western continent? I'm afraid you're from a place farther away than that," Tetragon said, and then turned serious. Everyone has their own secret, and I will not delve into it. I'm willing to believe you, and I hope you can shoulder my trust. Senior Tetragon, you're a good person, but, Tetragon could not help but laugh. Enough, don't think I don't know the meaning of the good person card. Resuscitation, I have observed the current 9 regions for a long time, and I also know your popular culture. However, since you resist it in your heart, I won't force it. But you'd better think about it carefully, so that you won't regret it in the future. Regret it in the future? The connotation of this sentence is really rich. In short, I will think about it. Now let's get back to the point. What else do you know about the traitor hidden in the Dixian team? Let's compare and analyze it together to see if we can lock him more clearly. Tetragon nodded and said, at present, there are 5 people with the highest suspicion: Black, Xian Mo, Bai Zhe, Luo Shui, and Bai Xiaoxing. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu frowned. The first 3 were all old acquaintances, while Luo Shui was proficient in all kinds of arts and had won many times in the grand competition with a crushing advantage, which made him famous. But what kind of sacred being was Bai Xiaoxing? I borrowed the Dawn Star Lord's magical power to win in your conduct test theory competition, Li Yunmu said. Tetragon lightly explained, in terms of knowledge, he is comparable to your Wuxia League's heavenly strategy. Comparable to heavenly strategy? He's indeed a Dixian level, but he was very low-key before. Tetragon said, so I also suspect him, but relatively speaking, he is the least likely. At present, the person I suspect the most is still Black. Chapter 727. Black was a very strange person. No matter from which point of view, this person was very suspicious. However, until Tetragon's resuscitation, he was the uncrowned king of the Dixian camp. His power and prestige were much greater than that of Sun Buping's deputy, Bai Zhe. And whether the Dixian agreed with his style of doing things or not, they all had considerable trust in him. And the reason was that Sun Buping trusted Black, so the others did not suspect him. This was especially evident in Xian Mo. Of course, this was very unreasonable. This kind of trust was simply blind faith and blind obedience. Even if Sun Buping had a great reputation, he should not love the house and its crow to this extent. What's more, according to Tetragon, Sun Buping realized at the last moment that he had trusted the wrong person. There was a traitor in the Dixian team, but he never discovered it. Could that person be Black? Now it seemed that it was very likely. Tetragon said, but I don't have conclusive evidence. Now that I think about it, many of the things that Black has done can only be said to be suspicious, but not enough to convict him. Wang Lu asked, is it necessary to be so particular? Since it is suspicious, just kill it first. Have you seen any leading cadres do things in accordance with the laws and regulations? As an emperor, you should have the awareness that the emperor breaks the law and does not care about the people. Tetragon said in a deep voice, if that's the case, I have to kill at least 1/3 of the Dixian team. In that era, there were too many suspicious people and things. How did you lead this team? Wang Lu was amazed. Leading a group of suspicious people to create a revolution? Isn't the construction of your team too sloppy? So Sun Buping is their leader, but I am not. He has the breadth of mind and courage to accept everything, but I don't have that interest. And it turns out that he is indeed wrong. Senior Gem Emperor bluntly commented on her former Dao companion, it's a pity that he left happily, but left me with a lot of trouble. I can't lock onto the target at all, so I can only muddy the waters first. At this point, Tetragon paused for a moment, and his expression became even more solemn. And now I'm very worried, whether there were any other changes before my resuscitation. Wang Lu asked, what do you mean by other changes? Before Sun Buping fell asleep, he told me that there was a traitor in Dixian. And after more than 10,000 years have passed, perhaps there will be more than one traitor. Wang Lu was slightly startled when he heard this, but he immediately understood. Because it was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. The so-called Dixian were just a group of powerful cultivators. There was still a qualitative gap between them and the real immortals who had ascended to the immortal world. It's in line with what that guy Wang Wu said. Wang Lu pondered and said, "So, I'm afraid something is going to happen in the near future. Severe pain. It tore the heart and split the lungs, penetrated deep into the bone marrow. Like a surging ocean, rolling waves, it swallowed people in an instant, making them lose their reason and go mad. Under this inhuman torture, even death became a kind of relief. The boundless pain lasted for no one knew how long. Finally, the wind and waves subsided, and in the dark ocean, a little light of sanity emerged. Am I finally dead?" The teenager pieced together the fragments of his reason and asked such a question in his heart. However, the next moment, a strong light suddenly lit up in front of him, which swept away the reverie in his mind. When he opened his eyes, he saw a very familiar scene. The spacious and gorgeous bedroom, the half-closed glass window, and the refreshing incense. This was his new home in the city of immortals. Every bit of the home was arranged by him, which looked particularly familiar. I am still alive? Was that a dream before? The teenager touched his head, feeling a lingering fear. Like I said, this city of immortals is obviously peaceful. How could someone suddenly commit murder openly? Moreover, it was against a wealthy businessman like me. What's more, the other party was the successor disciple of the famous Four-Element Supreme. He had a promising future, and there was no enmity between them. So, why would he take the risk of being arrested and deliberately kill him? However, just as the young man was gradually relieved, he suddenly realized something strange. In an instant, his hair stood on end. The teenager found that his body was out of control. At this time, he was sitting cross-legged on the bed, and a faint purple smoke came out of his 7 orifices, as if he was cultivating some strange method. The teenager was sure that he had never learned such a strange method. Moreover, he had just come back from the gates of hell, so he had no intention to cultivate at home. In the final analysis, he was not interested in immortal cultivation. In contrast, he was more willing to be a rich man and win status with wealth. If he had to cultivate, he would choose those who had a good appearance, but now, he couldn't help but spit out the purple smoke. His hands and feet danced, and he couldn't stop even if he wanted to. What's going on here? Why are my hands and feet not listening to me? In a panic, the teenager tried to use the inner vision method to see what was wrong with his body. However, the next moment, he was shocked to find that his primordial spirit was gone. This was, of course, contrary to common sense. If a person's primordial spirit disappeared, it was basically equal to losing his soul, a dead end. Moreover, without primordial spirit, how could a person think? Since the resuscitation, the teenager's thinking had been running fast, and his thinking must have a place. Without primordial spirit, where could his thinking go? Now, what's the situation? Dead face, you, come and save me. The fear in the teenager's heart grew deeper and deeper. Vaguely, he realized that some things might not be a dream. He visited Luo Xiao, was led into the courtyard by him, and then saw an identical version of himself in the house, and then fell into darkness. When his consciousness was resuscitation, he experienced a painful torture. Now that he thought about it, this experience became more and more bizarre and completely confusing. However, the teenager, after all, had some experience in the city of immortals. With the prosperity of his business, the more he came into contact with them, and gradually, he had a good understanding of some strange methods. Therefore, the teenager suddenly guessed something. Could it be that right now, I'm actually a puppet controlled by someone? And a little of my consciousness is embellished on the puppet as a camouflage? If that's the case, doesn't that mean, the teenager's heart trembled with fear. The real me is dead, and now I'm just a remnant soul? While thinking about it, his body suddenly stiffened involuntarily, and the faint purple smoke was quickly retracted into his body. The teenager knew that the puppet had received a new instruction and was ready to go. At the same time, there was a familiar sound of footsteps outside the house. Dead face? The teenager was startled, and then a deeper horror came. He roared in his heart. Dead face, run! Someone wants to ambush you. Run away. Unfortunately, his body was no longer in control. What came out of his mouth was the opposite of what he wanted to say. Dead face, I just encountered some trouble in my cultivation. My limbs are paralyzed, I urgently need help. The footsteps outside the house stopped. Immediately, the dead-faced man slowly walked over. Chapter 728. Dead face never walked fast, but at this time, his footsteps sounded so hurried to Xu Si. One step, one step. In the blink of an eye, Dead face walked from the gate of the spacious courtyard to the door of his bedroom. And every step meant that he was closer to the abyss. Xu Si couldn't wait to explode a little bit of his soul to warn him not to come close. However, at this time, he was completely powerless and could only watch everything happen. However, the footsteps of the dead man's face stopped at the door. The cold voice came in through the door, but it warmed Xu Si's heart. I asked you to visit Luo Xiao to seek cooperation. Did you do it? The tone was as cold as ever, but Xu Si swore that he had never looked forward to Dead Face's cold treatment. Hurry up and leave after you lose your temper. Don't come in. But the puppet he possessed obviously wouldn't give up so easily. Luo Xiao said that he would seriously consider it, so I came back in advance to celebrate. Who knew that my mood would be so agitated that my practice would go wrong? Dead face, don't stand at the door to question me. Come in and help. The puppet's imitation was so perfect that Xu Si felt as if he could hear his other self speaking. Fortunately, Dead face didn't let him down. What kind of practice are you practicing? Why are your limbs paralyzed and you can't move? The puppet replied, what else can it be? Of course, it's the ice heart technique you taught me. Ice heart technique? Where did you know this name? Outside the room, Dead Face's voice became colder and colder, even Xu Si's spirit began to tremble slightly. Yes, he had never practiced the ice heart technique. What Dead Face taught him was clearly the jade bone technique. However, Luo Xiao designed this trap to kill him. Perhaps, he had already investigated him thoroughly. How could he even make a mistake about what he practiced? So, who was wrong in the end? At the same time, after hearing this, the puppet's controller was slightly stunned and then explained, of course, I heard it from someone. You changed the name of the ice heart technique to jade bone technique. When I was practicing with my friends, they could see that it was the ice heart technique at a glance. The dead-faced man coldly interrupted outside the door, you have never liked to cultivate. How can you have any friends to compare skills with you? The puppet seemed to be angry. Dead face, don't always expose me, okay? I've been exposed by the expert, okay? If you have the time to criticize me outside the door, why don't you come in and help me? If there are any side effects, I, as a disciple, will lose face for you. This tone was exactly the same as the real Xu Si. But Dead Face was apparently aware of something. He still stood outside the door and asked unhurriedly, which expert would care about such a trivial matter? It's Luo Xiao. If he had seen through Luo Xiao's problem, he should have kept him as far away from Luo Xiao as possible. No, he did do this before. He ordered the Qingfeng business firm to stop all projects related to Luo Xiao early. He was puzzled about this. If he knew that Luo Xiao had a problem at that time, why did he force him to talk about cooperation with Luo Xiao a few days ago? Then, wasn't he sending him to his death? Luo Xiao said again, after thinking about it, the only reasonable explanation is that you want to threaten me with this. So you didn't make a move yourself and sent your disciple as a chess piece to test me. You clearly told me that you already know my new identity. As for whether this pawn is dead or alive, of course you don't care. It's just that you probably didn't expect me to do it so quickly. I didn't hesitate to make a big fuss in the City of Immortals to kill you. The above is the most reasonable guess I can make, but to be on the safe side, I'll give you a chance to speak. Xianninzi, cherish this opportunity. Say something that can surprise me. I may spare your life. For Luo Xiao, who had the overall situation under control at this moment, he indeed had the capital to waste his words. He calmly watched Xianninzi in the sea of fire, waiting for his answer. Xianninzi's response was another sneer. Luo Xiao, your guess is only right on one point. Oh. That little mouse is indeed just a chess piece in my hand. However, I have never abandoned a chess piece in my hand. Hearing this answer, Luo Xiao's face was slightly gloomy. Moreover, you made a mistake in your judgment of this little mouse. He does not cultivate the ice heart technique. Not the ice heart technique? Then it must be the jade bone skill? Luo Xiao frowned. So what? Luo Xiao, let me ask you a question. After you killed my disciple and took his soul, did you deal with his body? Have you ever thought about what that body is doing now? Luo Xiao's face changed. You. Chapter 729. The conversation in the courtyard continued. However, the situation of the two sides seemed to be gradually reversed. Xianninzi looked at Luo Xiao coldly and said, beating the grass to scare the snake is because if I didn't hit you, how could you expose your big weakness? You killed the shopkeeper of Qingfeng Enterprise and set up a trap in the City of Immortals to silence him. With these two solid evidence, even if your idiot master wants to protect you, he can't. Hearing this, Luo Xiao's expression of having everything under control finally converged and was replaced by a strong doubt. So, you really have been planning for a long time. But how did you find out? Even my master couldn't see the slightest clue, how could you? Xianninzi couldn't help but laugh and said, why? Good question. You must tell me, because you and I are actually the same kind of person, so how could I not know what you're thinking? Luo Xiao said, the same kind of person? You and me? What a joke. Joke? Do you think the god of war blood is unique to you in this world? This time, Luo Xiao finally changed his face and said, you also have the god of war blood? So I know very well what people with this bloodline will do in a hurry. You have always locked Wang Lu as your opponent, but seeing that Wang Lu has left you farther and farther behind, and you have gradually lost the qualification to compete with him on the same stage, it's natural for a cornered dog to jump over the wall. The god of war blood is actually not afraid of failure. Even if you are repeatedly defeated, as long as your fighting spirit is not lost, you have the opportunity to start again. It's not smooth sailing for you in Huayan School. It took you a few years to defeat the lead disciple of the inner court. But the situation with Wang Lu is different, because you will soon find that you no longer have the chance to defeat him in theory. Luo Xiao said coldly, you have too much confidence in Wang Lu. It's because you're too confident in Wang Lu. It's because you believe that Wang Lu's advantage over you is too great that you can't make up for it. That's why you're willing to give up everything you have and take the risk. When Xianninzi said this, there was a little more emotion in his plain tone, as the same kind, I have to admit that your choice is right. Oh. It sounds like you really understand what I'm thinking. Wang Lu's invincibility is based on the premise that you and him are in the same Wanxian League camp. In the Wanxian League, resources were limited. If Wang Lu took more, he would leave less for others. He had already taken away the only shortcut. No matter how well you did, you wouldn't be able to reach the heavens in one step under the King Pill realm like him. Therefore, only by jumping out of the framework of the Wanxian League could you struggle to have a chance of winning. Outside of the Wanxian League, you don't have many choices. First, the evil sections. Although there's the Wanxian League in 9 regions, the evil sects still occupy a vast area of land. The demon's nest in the easternmost land is also quite famous. Luo Xiao sneered, even the demon world has been destroyed, what can the demon sects in 9 regions do? The city of immortals was clearly developed by the Wanxian League, but those demon sects hurriedly came out of the demon's nest to seek cooperation. It can be seen that their foundation has long been unstable, and it will be gradually eroded by the Wanxian League and even destroyed. It's just a matter of time. Xianxi said, the second is Dixian. Luo Xiao shook his head and said, Dixian seems to be powerful and invincible, but their number is small, and they're like a group of dragons without a leader. They have an absolute advantage in strength, but they're played by Wang Lu alone. These people can't do anything. Xianxi sneered and said, since neither of these 2 ways works, then there's only the third way, the fallen immortal. Luo Xiao was silent for a moment, and then faintly said, to be able to say the answer of the fallen immortal. It seems that you really can understand what I'm thinking. However, since you know that I chose to join the fallen immortal camp, why do you still dare to provoke me? Don't you know how powerful the fallen immortals are? Xianxi said, in the past, the true immortals of the upper realm were naturally powerful, but to say that they are omnipotent, that's not necessarily true. Otherwise, why would they accept the surrender of an insignificant ant like you? If even you can get great benefits from the fallen immortals, it can only mean that they have no one to use. Luo Xiao sneered and said, yes, they have the magical ability to destroy the world, but now they are still under a lot of restrictions, so it's difficult to display it in 9 regions. That's why they need the surrender of a local like me to help them complete the layout. As for whether I'm an insignificant ant or a precious chess piece, we can wait and see. Wait and see. There's no need to be so troublesome. I can guess what you're going to do. Xianxi sneered and said, if you surrender to the fallen immortals, you must have a proof of allegiance to win people's trust. And with your current conditions, the proof of allegiance that you can get is nothing more than Shizhou. Although his character is surly, he is very trusting of his own people. It's not difficult for you to accept this proof of allegiance. But I have a question for you, Luo Xiao. In my impression, although you're not a good person, you at least have your own bottom line in doing things. Even if Shizhou's kindness to you is not as heavy as a mountain, he can still be called your noble person. From Hua Yan School to 4 Elements School, he has saved you at least 10 years of hard work. What's more, a teacher for a day is a father for life. Don't you feel guilty for killing your father for your own selfishness? Upon hearing this, Luo Xiao narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice, Xianxi, you talk too much nonsense. Xianxi said, then I'll say something useful. From just now to now, you should have spent a lot of effort to find the body of that little mouse. I wonder if you found it? Or rather, is it enough for you to do it alone? Luo Xiao was silent for a moment and said, you want to talk to me about a deal? Otherwise, you don't have to waste your time talking to me here. Let me think about it. You know that I betrayed 9 regions, which is an unpardonable evil, but you still want to make a deal with me. Are you also interested in the fallen immortal? Hearing this, Xu Si, who was restrained in the puppet, was shocked. Dead face, what the hell do you want to do? Fallen immortal? Xianxi sneered a few times and said, if I'm interested in the fallen immortal, it's not your turn to surrender. Do you think you're the only one who is smart and knows how to take shortcuts? Don't deceive yourself. You're just a stray dog who has been cornered by Wang Lu. Very well. Luo Xiao nodded his head and said no more. His right hand grasped in the air, and suddenly, the burning flame in the courtyard was extinguished silently. Xianxi, who was close to deity stage, had a looming gold and silver rope on his body. There's not only one proof of allegiance. It's a pleasant surprise that you're so powerful. Xianxi was tied up by the rope, and his true yuan was imprisoned, unable to be released. However, his face did not change, and there was even a faint smile on his face. Luo Xiao, use your brain. How can you fall into the same pit twice? Have you forgotten the jade bone technique? Luo Xiao's face changed, and he quickly raised another hand, trying to trap Xianxi more tightly. However, it was a step too late. In the midst of Xianxi's wild laughter, his eyebrows shone brilliantly, as if a sun was ignited. Self-destructing your yuanying, are you crazy? Luo Xiao didn't expect that this cultivator named Xianxi would be so unyielding. At the critical moment, Luo Xiao immediately changed his technique and took out a blood-stained scroll. The scroll was yellow in color, but once it was unfolded, it was full of vitality, as if it contained a boundless universe. Xianxi was sucked into the scroll in an instant. The scroll put away Xianxi and flew back to Luo Xiao's hand again. When Luo Xiao took the scroll, he only felt a slight tremble in his hand. He knew that this was the impact of Xianxi self-destructing his yuanying. The power was really strong. Unfortunately, for this sky fragment map, it could be easily resolved with a slight tremble. It's a pity. Luo Xiao shook his head, looking quite regretful. In fact, Luo Xiao really had no intention to kill Xianxi, although when he first set up the killing here, he wanted to kill him to silence him. But after a conversation, Luo Xiao felt that this person, who also had the god of war blood, might be able to play an unexpected role in the future. That was why he used the immortal binding rope instead of other more lethal magical weapons. At that time, he even made a decision in his heart that after he restrained Xianxi, he would spend a lot of effort to exonerate him in front of the fallen immortals. Who knew that this Xianxi would so decisively self-destruct his yuanying and choose death? In the information, this cultivator from Qingming Dojo was unknown and low-key. He really didn't look like someone who would do such a thing. What a pity. What a pity. After dealing with Xianxi, Luo Xiao was a bit dispirited. He came here to kill people to silence them, so that the information about the fallen immortals wouldn't be leaked too early. Now, although the goal had been achieved, it left both regret and hidden danger. He turned his head and looked at the puppet that was transformed from Shu Xi's remnant soul. This puppet was originally used to lure Xianxi to take the bait. Now that Xianxi was dead, the bait was naturally useless. But he still had to keep it. After all, this was the shopkeeper of Qing Feng Enterprise. Dead Face came and went like a ghost. Only Shu Xi knew his existence, but there were too many people who knew Shu Xi. If he disappeared inexplicably, it was likely to cause unnecessary trouble. Luo Xiao found it a bit funny and said, "Those who should live don't live, but those who should die can't die immediately." While speaking, outside the courtyard, a golden shadow quietly floated into the courtyard. A pure gold strong man appeared in front of Luo Xiao. The strong man carried a young man who had fainted on his shoulder. The young man had delicate features, it was Shu Xi. After the pure gold strong man put down the young man, he quietly left, leaving only a sentence, "Be careful next time." Luo Xiao shrugged his shoulders as if nothing had happened, but his back was soaked with cold sweat. It was not easy to deal with the fallen immortals, at the same time, in the Immortal 5 area, outside the small courtyard belonging to the chief planner of the organizing committee, a strange visitor arrived. The man seemed to be in his early 30s, tall, handsome, and particularly impressive was his pair of intelligent and spirited eyes. What was even more shocking was his red and white Taoist robe. Because that was the uniform of the successor disciple of Lingjian school. Chapter 730. What? Wang Lu is not here? Are you kidding me? When we need to work overtime, you say he's not here? If you want to find a reasonable excuse, you should at least find it. Moreover, I'm not an outsider, can't you see it from my clothes? Damn, I'm not a role-playing enthusiast, I'm wearing a genuine successor disciple of Spirit Sword sect, okay? You've been working for Wang Lu for so long, can't you even see the authenticity of the clothes? What? Haven't you heard that there's a fourth successor disciple in Lingjian school? What a joke. Of course, I'm not the fourth successor disciple, I'm the first. In theory, when your boss sees me, he should also call me senior brother. When he walked the immortal path to Spirit Sword Mountain, I watched the whole process. It could be said that I've witnessed his growth with my own eyes, yet you guys actually dare to stop me at the door. Outside the courtyard, a tall young man danced with excitement. The two young cultivators who guarded the door smiled helplessly, but they just didn't let him in. After a moment of noise, a lazy and irritated voice came from the courtyard. What's the noise outside? Didn't I tell you to beat away all door-to-door salesmen? After hearing this, the young cultivators who guarded the door seemed to be under even more pressure. One of them quickly turned around and bowed toward the courtyard, explaining, reporting to Taoist Master Nanfei's, there's someone outside who claims to be the successor disciple of your sect, but I've never heard that your sect has a fourth successor disciple. At the same time, the tall young man looked happy. Master, it's me. When the young cultivator at the door heard this, his knees went soft and his mind went blank. Master? In 9 regions, there was only one person who would call Taoist Master Nanfei's master, Taoist Master Wang Lu. How did you become like this? In the eyes of these two people, the person outside the door was obviously Wang Lu in disguise. Although even his father wouldn't be able to recognize him, they were just 2 gatekeepers, yet they stopped the master of the courtyard outside the door. It was hard to imagine that they would end up well. Wang Lu was not a difficult person to talk to, but he was first and foremost a senior leader of the Wanxian League organizing committee. In most cases, it would not end well to make the leader unhappy. Just as the gatekeeper was about to collapse, the courtyard door was pushed open from the inside. A barefooted woman in white walked out of the courtyard with a rather complicated expression. The tall young man appeared to be of high status. Master, long time no see. Oh, no, sorry, I forgot again. Fifth martial uncle, long time no see. How have you been all these years? I miss you very, very much. But you still look as beautiful as before. Everything must be going well, right? Wang Wu looked at him. Yin Xian, why did you come back? Hearing Yin Xian's name, the 2 gatekeepers looked at each other, their hearts that had sunk to the bottom of the valley floated up again. As long as it wasn't Wang Lu, everything would be fine. Who had ever heard of Yin Xian? However, the 2 of them knew that it was best for them not to listen to the rest of the conversation, so they silently cupped their hands towards Wang Wu and disappeared without a trace. Wang Wu did not look at the 2 of them from the beginning to the end. Her attention was all focused on Yin Xian. Forget it, are you here to look for Wang Lu? He's really not here. Do you want me to look for your master to catch up? Yin Xian was a little surprised. Junior Wang Lu is really not here? It's not a good time for him to skip work. I have something important to tell him. But, fifth martial uncle, it's fine too. Something important? Wang Wu frowned. She knew that although Yin Xian was a little crazy, he would never joke about important matters. Due to various reasons, he spent most of his time wandering around the mountain and rarely came into contact with the people of Lingjian school. The last time they met was during the Immortal Gathering. After that, more than 30 years had passed, and Yin Xian had never appeared in the sight of Lingjian school. Now that he suddenly appeared, it must be a big deal. So, Wang Wu raised her hand slightly and a golden light enveloped the two of them. Say it, no one can hear you now. Yin Xian nodded and then spoke, but at the same time, he passed the real information through the secret method of his primordial spirit. Xian Yinzi is dead. This sentence made Wang Wu's eyes suddenly become sharp. You said Xian Yinzi is dead? Yes, just now, I was ambushed and killed. Before Yin Xian could finish his words, Wang Wu had already grabbed his wrist. Wang Wu put 4 fingers on Yin Xian's wrist, and after a moment of silence, she put down her hand and sighed. Yin Xian smiled quite happily and said, I know that master still loves me. Wang Wu shook her head and said, Xian Yinzi is dead. Even if you can suppress the backlash of the god of war blood for a while, you can't suppress it forever. Make a new doppelganger as soon as possible. Well, the materials have already been prepared, but you still need to help me. Wang Wu was silent for a while. Okay. In addition, who killed Xian Yinzi? Good question. Yin Xian said excitedly, this is the main reason why I came to find Wang Lu. I believe that no one would have thought that the person who did it was Luo Xiao. He has defected to the fallen immortal camp and is helping them secretly arrange things. The next step is to deal with Shizhou Jin. Xian Yinzi used a chess piece in his hand as bait to fish out Luo Xiao, forcing him to kill people so as to reveal a bigger flaw. As a result, Luo Xiao did fall into the trap and set up a killing trap in Xian Yinzi's house to silence him. After listening to this statement, Wang Wu asked, can he see the connection between you and Xian Yinzi? Yin Xian pondered for a moment. There's no reason to see it. At most, he was a little surprised by Xian Yinzi's decisiveness in blowing up his Yuanying. But he couldn't find anything more. As for Xian Yinzi's life experience, he only found out about Qingming Dojo. So, for him, killing people to silence them is a success. Yes, even the body puppet sent by Xian Yinzi was intercepted and killed by him halfway. He should have nothing to worry about. Wang Wu didn't speak. After a moment of silence, she said, come with me. With that, Wang Wu clenched her right hand into a fist and swung it to the side. Boom! The silent impact shattered the space, and a hole appeared next to the courtyard. Come! Along the hole, Wang Wu took Yin Xian across thousands of rivers and mountains in one step, from the City of Immortals to the highest point in Blue River region, Spirit Sword Mountain. The place Wang Wu chose to stay was Spirit Pool Peak. At this time, sect leader Feng Yin, Lu Xian, and Fang He were all in the pink building of Spirit Pool Peak. Sensing the abnormal fluctuations outside the building, Fang He got up in surprise and came out to check the situation. He was not surprised to see Wang Wu. However, the person behind Wang Wu made Fang He open his mouth wide. Yin Xian? The next moment, Fang He was furious. He took 3 steps forward and slapped Yin Xian in the face. You still have the nerve to come back? Yin Xian was slapped thousands of feet away and fell all the way into the cloud and missed a ray outside Spirit Pool Peak. It took him a long time to float back. Half of his face was badly mutilated, but at this time, he smiled mischievously and said, Master is really old but vigorous. You're so old, but your temper is more vigorous than young people. It's hard to imagine that you're just a mere Yuanying stage cultivator. At this time, Fang He slightly restrained his anger and looked at Yin Xian coldly. A mere Yuanying stage. The god of war blood is really extraordinary. 30 years ago, you were still a step away from shoot on stage, but today, you're almost standing side by side with me. No wonder you look down on a mere yuanying stage cultivator. Yin Xian laughed and said, Master, you're too exaggerated. How can disciples stand side by side with you? Although we're both in yuanying stage, you can at least beat 100 of me. I still have this self-knowledge. With that, Yin Xian's smile also converged a bit. Compared with your generation who have experienced the catastrophe, what's a mere god of war blood? Master, you really don't need to have too much of a sense of crisis. Sense of crisis? What a joke. Fang He was about to attack but was stopped by Wang Wu. Senior brother, I didn't bring him here to quarrel with you. I'm afraid something big is going to happen in the City of Immortals. Fang He looked at Wang Wu in surprise. For this mischievous fellow to become so focused and serious, could it be that it was really something extraordinary? Come in. Fang He then brought the two into the pink house. Inside the building, when Feng Yin and Lu Xian saw Yin Xian, they were equally surprised. However, Yin Xian didn't waste time talking nonsense. He went straight to the point and told them everything that his avatar, Xian Yinzi, had seen and heard. After hearing the whole story, the elders in the Spirit Pool Peak were all silent. After a long time, Fang He tapped the table with his knuckles and said, Senior brother, according to the emergency procedure of the Wanxian League, this matter should be reported to the Heavenly Sage Hall as soon as possible. However, Lu Xian shook his head and said, Heavenly Sage Hall? Who knows if the people in there are reliable? Even an ant like Luo Shao has been infiltrated by the fallen immortals. I don't believe that there are no insiders among the higher-ups of the fallen immortals. Let alone others, when Luo Shao restrained Xian Yinzi, who intercepted Shu Xi's body. Fang He said, that person is obviously an assistant to Luo Shao. Would the elders of Heavenly Sage Hall be willing to be under Luo Shao? Lu Xian still disagreed. Not necessarily. In the eyes of the fallen immortals, whether it's deity stage or king pill, I'm afraid they are no different from ants. Compared with their cultivation base, I'm afraid they care more about other things. Moreover, Yin Xian, did you see that person's face? Yin Xian said, the person who did it hid very deeply. His method of hiding his tracks is very brilliant. Although Xian Yinzi has a trace of primordial spirit attached to Shu Xi's body, he was strangled before he could see the opponent's real body. Although it's only a trace of primordial spirit, it's still the primordial spirit of a yuanying stage cultivator. At least, it's not something that an ant like Luo Shao can do. While Lu Xian and Fang He were still in a dispute, Wang Wu suddenly stood up. Junior sister, where are you going? Wang Wu looked at the several people in the room with contemptuous eyes. You bunch of idiots are really hopeless. You can quarrel as long as you want. I'm going to find Shizhou first. With that, she shattered the space with another punch and stepped into the void with a single step. Inside the pink house, several elders looked at each other in dismay. Indeed. At least, there should be no problem with Shizhou, who is listed as their target. He sat quietly in the hall, looking down and not saying a word. On the other hand, Yin Xian was still lively and cheerful. Martial Uncle's sect leader is exaggerating. In just over 30 years, I went from half a step into the Shudan stage to where I am today. Although I had to work hard for myself, the foundation that my master had laid for me also couldn't go unnoticed, to be honest. With my speed, even junior brother Wang Lu shouldn't be able to match me, right? Lu Xian shook his head. In terms of pure cultivation speed, if it was half a year ago, he was indeed slightly inferior to you, before achieving the king pill, his cultivation speed was not ridiculously fast. But now, he has also advanced to the yuanying stage, and his progress is rapid. If you really fight, you may not be his opponent. Yin Xian was a little surprised, but he was not depressed at all. Instead, he sighed sincerely. To be able to receive the teachings of fifth uncle at a close distance, this kind of advantage is indeed not something that a mere god of war blood can make up for. Then he changed the topic. Well, although my cultivation progress is not as good as yours, I have been living a free and unfettered life these years, and I have violated some sect rules. Before he finished speaking, he heard Fang He snort coldly, and the temperature in the whole hall dropped a few degrees. Yin Xian immediately changed his words. I have done a heroic deed, such as robbing the rich to help the poor. Moreover, although it is indeed inconvenient to be split into two, it is also because I have this avatar, Xianinzi, that I occupy both sides of yin and yang, and we are each other's mortal enemies. We fight each other endlessly, and the god of war blood continues to boil, so that in just over 30 years, I can soar from half a step into the Shudan stage all the way to the present realm. For this, I have no regrets. As soon as his voice fell, Yin Xian caught a glimpse of Fang He's livid face, and quickly added, of course, Xianinzi's avatar has inherited the cold-blooded and ruthless part of my heart, and it is inevitable that he will violate human relations. But he is him, and I am me. He is your avatar. You are responsible for the sins he has committed. Fang He roared. Yin Xian immediately changed his words. Yes, this disciple knows this very well. Therefore, for more than 30 years, I have been trying to correct and stop his extreme behavior, and have achieved good results. I will never let him do the unimaginable act of destroying the Qingming dojo again. Speaking of this, I have always wanted to add that the Qingming dojo looks like a dog on the surface, but in fact, it is a place where men are thieves and women are prostitutes. They deserve to be destroyed. There are 3,972 people in the Qingming dojo. Do you dare to say that none of them are innocent? Yin Xian frowned. Master, this is where your and my ideas have always been diametrically opposed. Those people in the Qingming dojo, if you ask whether they have never done evil with their own hands, there must be. But in such a big environment, the existence of each of them is contributing to the continuation of the dojo. In other words, their existence is evil. Although Xianinzi's way is extreme, it is not incomprehensible. Fang He was even angrier. However, compared with Yin Xian's refutation, Fang He was more concerned about what he said. Xianinzi is dead. Has his idea begun to affect you? Yin Xian was silent for a while. Actually, when you forced me to kneel down and repent, I was just fooling you. I always thought that Xianinzi did a good job. You? Well, now is not the time to care about these old things. Feng Yin stretched out his hand to interrupt Fang He. Yin Xian, this time, you were able to discover the action of the fallen immortals first, which is a great achievement, but... Did you calculate all this a long time ago? Yin Xian said, of course it's impossible. At first, I, or Xianinzi, just wanted to cultivate a useful chess piece, but no one expected that this chess piece would really play a big role. That little guy died a worthy death. At this time, Fang He couldn't help but snort coldly, worthy death. Shu Si still trusted you until the last moment before his death, but you mercilessly threw him away as an abandoned chess piece. Yin Xian shrugged and said, well, I think. No, it's Xianinzi who thinks that he and Shu Si don't owe each other anything. Shu Si was originally a vagrant in the marketplace. If it weren't for Xianinzi's support, I'm afraid he wouldn't have lived to the age of 30. Fang He coldly said, he hasn't lived to the age of 15. But he has experienced the joy that most people in the world can't experience. The shopkeeper of Qing Feng Enterprise, even if it's only for a day, is more valuable than a vagrant for a lifetime. Yin Xian sternly said, on this point, I. No, Xianxi doesn't think Xu Si has the right to complain. Seeing that the master and disciple were about to quarrel again, Feng Yin interrupted with a question, enough, now is not the time to care about this. Yin Xian, what else do you have to say about the fallen immortals? Yin Xian said, there's one thing, after Luo Shao killed Xianxi, he didn't kill Xu Si along with him. Instead, he left a wisp of his remnant soul on the puppet. I can now clearly sense that Xu Si's remnant soul is still active. Although the jade bone technique that Xu Si cultivated seemed to be the same as the relatively popular Ice Heart secret art, it naturally added some special content, so that Yin Xian could control this chess piece at any time. Even if the other party only had a wisp of remnant soul left. In this regard, although Feng Yin Daoist master didn't say it explicitly, it was obvious from his expression that he didn't agree with it. This kind of cultivation method that directly refined people as puppets was definitely not honorable, or to put it bluntly, it was simply an evil and crooked cultivation method. Even without Luo Zhao's betrayal, Xu Si would never have been able to achieve anything on the road of immortal cultivation by relying on the jade bone technique. However, the difference between Feng Yin and Fang He was that he knew how to be flexible. So, can you sense the movements of Luo Shao through the remnant soul? Yin Xian said, it's very difficult. On one hand, Xu Si's remnant soul can't bear too many things. On the other hand, Luo Shao is not with Xu Si right now. He seems to have other things to do. However, Xu Si's remnant soul can be used as a foreshadowing, and Luo Shao will not make any unnecessary movements. Leaving Xu Si alive is most likely because he wants to further control the Qing Feng trading company through the flesh puppet. Although that trading company is my plaything, the scale is not small, and it can completely make waves. He kept Xu Si's remnant soul in order to deceive people. The puppet with the remnant soul is almost no different from the real body. With Xu Si's social circle, no one can see through it at a glance. But we can also take advantage of this point, and at a critical time, it may play an unexpected role. Feng Yin nodded, you're very thoughtful. Yin Xian smiled and said, thank you for the praise, sect leader uncle. So, after saying so much, may I ask, am I qualified? Feng Yin was slightly startled. Yin Xian took this opportunity to ask, can I win your trust? Feng Yin heaved a long sigh and was speechless. At the same time, an uninvited guest arrived at the Four Element Sect's encampment. Four Element Sect. I know you're here, don't pretend to be dead. A distinguished guest is here, but you don't send people to welcome her, but you actually dare to close the door on me? Be careful that I break the door and go in to catch you in bed. The barefooted woman in white loudly provoked the no less than 20 pairs of angry eyes at the entrance of the encampment. For the cultivators of the Four Element Sect, this was really a rare spectacle in decades. A dignified high-rank Wanxian League sect was actually blocked and scolded by a Daoist Master King Pill? This was simply unheard of. However, considering that the person who made this bizarre move was the famous number 1 King Pill in 9 regions, these gatekeepers could only swallow their anger. Because even if they wanted to make a sound, it was not their turn. Shijiujin was indeed cultivating in seclusion in the encampment. And when encountering this kind of thing, it was impossible for him not to show up. Sure enough, after the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Shijiujin stepped out of his cave residence and came to the outside of the encampment, in front of Wang Wu. There was an obvious angry look on his face, and how could the anger of a supreme be ordinary? The several King Pill cultivators who guarded the gate, even just looking at his back, felt difficult to breathe. What's the matter? Chapter 732. Of course. Wang Wu nodded heartily and generously. In the face of Shizhou, who was as majestic as the ocean, her posture did not waver at all. The number one king pill in 9 regions was indeed a well-deserved reputation. The gatekeeper cultivators could not help but sigh that the old saying was too accurate. In the world, there were only wrong names, but no wrong nicknames. In the face of the anger of a supreme, which king pill in the world could be so calm and collected? Several of the gatekeepers were also the best of the king pill, and they were also cultivators of 4-element sect. However, just looking at the back of Shizhou, they felt that their bladder was a bit swollen. They asked themselves honestly, even if they cultivated for another 10 or 20 years and had a big breakthrough in their stage, it was likely that it would still be difficult for them to face the anger of a supreme. However, Wang Wu seemed to be at ease, and her potential was completely bottomless. Such a person could not be measured by the standard of king pill. She was a monster who looked like a king pill. A monster who dared to speak wildly in front of a supreme. "I'm here to challenge you." At this moment, Shizhou's anger was suppressed by a greater shock. Challenge me? Even though Shizhou had been well informed, he really did not expect to encounter such a strange thing. Wang Wu, the number one king pill in 9 regions, who had quite a good evaluation in the high-level circle, was possessed by the devil in her cultivation, and the devil chi entered her brain. She actually dared to challenge a supreme who had been famous for many years and was good at actual combat. Could it be that in the past 6 months of the grand competition, the excessive emphasis on the grading system made her forget herself and really think that she was omnipotent? However, even if Wang Wu's self-confidence was too inflated, what reason did she have to challenge him? Thus, Shizhou was silent in the face of the challenge, waiting for Wang Wu's further explanation. If this explanation did not satisfy him, he did not mind using painful and unforgettable means to teach his opponent the insurmountable gap between the form synthesis stage and the king pill stage. There was a momentary calm before the storm. The next moment, Wang Wu opened her mouth. She seemed to have expected such a question, so she calmly said, "I am here to protect the moral standard of 9 regions." "What did you say?" Shizhou's eyes widened in disbelief. The majesty of the dark clouds covering the sky gradually dissipated due to excessive shock. Wang Wu, the woman who was known as the holder of the lower limit in 9 regions, actually claimed that she came to protect the moral standard. For you, the best way to protect the morality of 9 regions is to pull out your sword and commit suicide. But after saying these absurd words, Wang Wu became even more serious. "I'm not joking. Although the world has many misunderstandings about me, deep in my heart, I am a person who cares about the world. I am known as the number one king pill in 9 regions, so naturally, I have to do something for this land that I love deeply." Shizhou endured the churning of his stomach and said, "Well, even if you care about the world, why did you come to my 4-element sect and talk nonsense?" Wang Wu said, "I am here to challenge you. As we all know, Supreme is the most famous reproduction expert in 9 regions." "Humph." Shizhou nodded with a slightly smug look. His anger at being challenged by Wang Wu's rude challenge had slightly subsided. He was not a straightforward person who was easy to be coaxed, but anyone would always be happy when they were praised in their most proud and good field. Moreover, except for Wang Wu, few people would so bluntly praise him as a reproduction expert. This title simply made Shizhou overjoyed. However, the next moment, the joy disappeared. And also the biggest asterisk in 9 regions. "You're the asterisk. Shizhou was so angry that if he didn't have the supreme-level immortal heart to suppress his impulse, he would have immediately attacked Wang Wu. "Since you know that I am the most professional reproduction expert in 9 regions, you should naturally understand that I hate those mating behaviors that have nothing to do with reproduction. For example, those short-sighted people in yin and yang school who only know how to enjoy and use the joy of sex, but refuse to think about the next generation of 9 regions when yin and yang are in harmony, I have always despised them. What I am engaged in is a great cause. That's just your self-righteousness and narcissism. Wang Wu unceremoniously said, in fact, the way of reproduction that you advocate will only become a breeding ground for ******. Cultivators who live in the present will not consider the future thousands of years later. For them, the way of reproduction will only be an excuse to enjoy the joy of sex. Promoting reproduction is to promote ******. When you righteously advocate reproduction, have you ever thought that if your children lose their chastity at a young age and sink into the joy of sex? Shi Jiujin angrily said, I have children, and each of them is an upright person. None of them have fallen into depravity. Wang Wu's face did not change. But there are thousands of parents in 9 regions who, because of the way of reproduction that you advocate, have to painfully watch their children fall into depravity in *****. For this, you, the reproduction expert, are duty-bound to do so. Whether it's your subjective will or not, you are the biggest ***** in 9 regions. Shi Jiujin was so angry by this rogue logic that he could hardly speak. However, Wang Wu pursued the victory, and I, the moral guardian of 9 regions, the promoter of the concept of chastity, the great anti-sex fighter, want to establish a correct outlook on life for the cultivators of 9 regions by defeating you. Let them know that the so-called evil way of reproduction is absolutely not feasible. Anyone who dares to do ***** in 9 regions will be firmly spurned. Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Shi Jiujin's roar. Wang Wu, go to hell. The next moment, the supreme-level battle was about to officially begin in the City of Immortals. However, Wang Wu was still calm and collected. Wait a minute. As she said that, she pulled out the emerald green bamboo sword from her waist and pointed it in front of her. Suddenly, the space within a radius of several dozens of meters appeared unnatural contraction and expansion, which made several cultivators of 4-element school feel very uncomfortable. Shi Jiujin showed a slightly surprised look. Just now, he made a move in anger. Although it was not his full strength, so it was not a killing move, in theory, it could definitely injure Wang Wu. Shi Jiujin had a very good estimate of Wang Wu's strength, so he did not treat her like a king pill. Just now, the invisible 4-phase break was the treatment of a deity stage cultivator. However, although Wang Wu reluctantly received it, in the end, she still received it. What else do you want to say? Wang Wu shook her sore wrist and said, if we do it here, it will only benefit Dixian. Let's go to the arena. Okay. Shi Jiujin gritted his teeth and temporarily held back his anger. In the City of Immortals, there was no shortage of arenas. Outside the central arena in Immortal 1 area, there were countless arenas of various sizes. And there was no lack of large venues that could accommodate the supreme-level battle. Wang Wu and Shi Jiujin left the station. Halfway there, Shi Jiujin suddenly asked, what exactly do you want from me this time? Although at first, he was really angered by Wang Wu that his primordial spirit trembled, Shi Jiujin didn't need to think about it to understand that Wang Wu would never come to provoke him for no reason. Especially after that sentence, she deliberately led him to the arena. There must be a reason behind this series of strange behavior. Supreme's eyes are like a torch, so I will say it directly. Sure enough, Wang Wu restrained her gentlemanly demeanor and became more familiar. There's a big problem with that successor disciple of yours. When Shi Jiujin heard this, countless scenes flashed in his mind, and then he understood why Wang Wu inexplicably provoked and angered him. Because shortly before Wang Wu came, Luo Xiao suddenly found him and said that he had something to discuss with him. Of course, Shi Jiujin attached great importance to his own successor disciple. But he couldn't turn a blind eye to Wang Wu's provocation outside the door. So he could only send Luo Xiao away and deal with the trouble of Wang Wu first. Now it seemed that this was Wang Wu's intention. What's the problem with Luo Xiao? Wang Wu was silent for a while. What I'm going to say next will be unimaginable. With our friendship, I don't expect Supreme to believe me. But you should at least listen to it once. Shizhou said, just based on the sword you used to block my 4 phases break, I can listen to your story, no matter how ridiculous it is. Okay, then. Wang Wu frowned and began to think about how to phrase her words. Being a lobbyist was really not her specialty. Especially when the person she was trying to persuade was a rather eccentric reproduction expert. Especially when she didn't have any words prepared. In fact, she was forced to fight just now. Wang Wu didn't expect Luo Xiao's action to be so fast. It was reasonable to say that after killing Xianninzi, he should at least spend some time to deal with the follow-up work. And he also had to consider whether there was a possibility of his plan being leaked. As a result, he actually came directly to Shizhou. If it weren't for Wang Wu's timely interruption, he would have succeeded. At that time, Wang Wu and Luo Xiao had already noticed each other's existence. Wang Wu and Shizhou didn't have any friendship, so it was easy for her to be rejected. Luo Xiao would definitely think of an excuse to hold Shizhou back and not let the two meet. Therefore, Wang Wu had to take an unconventional approach. As an anti-sex fighter, she forced Shizhou to come out. The only problem was that her actions just now seemed to be a bit too obvious. It was inevitable that it would alert the enemy. Would Luo Xiao realize that he had been exposed? Would he further think about the secret of Xianninzi? However, she really couldn't care so much. At this time, Wang Wu suddenly became a little lost in thought. Because she thought that if Wang Lu was here, there might be a way to make the best of both worlds. Not only could it prevent Luo Xiao from attacking Shizhou, but it could also arrange all of this so that Luo Xiao couldn't say any flaws and doubts. Wang Lu had too many tricks up his sleeves. So, bitch, when it's time for you to show up, where the hell are you slacking off? Chapter 733. Hiss Roar. Accompanied by a long and desolate dragon roar, a flash of light exploded in the middle of the vortex of stars. A slender dragon that stretched for hundreds of miles was severed in the middle. The sea of blood was like a river of stars, but in a moment, the two halves of the corpse were wrapped in the sea of stars and quickly melted in the starlight. At the same time, the world inside the body of the dragon, as well as the millions of creatures in that world, also disappeared. Another Gisaurus died tragically, and the culprit was completely indifferent to the annihilation of millions of creatures. A pair of cold eyes kept looking for new targets in the vortex of stars, filled with murderous intent. This scene that was even colder than the abyss was soon interrupted by a slightly tired young voice, and it came to an abrupt end. I say, respected senior tetragon, have your hormones been a little out of whack recently? In the vortex of stars, the cold eyes that set off countless bloody storms turned indifferently. The power of an imperial emperor was enough to make the stars tremble, but the person who spoke seemed calm and composed in the face of all this. However, he was somewhat frowning. Previously, you said that the real traitor must be hiding in the vortex of stars. I asked why, and you said that your intuition told you the answer. Okay, I believe you. You said that if you want to catch that person as soon as possible, you have to keep releasing pressure and force him to reveal himself, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Then, you said that you want me to watch the whole process, and that I would rather accompany you to slack than work overtime, so I also agreed. But, this is the absurd play that you want me to watch? The daily life of the dragon-slaying hero Tetragon? Wang Lu curled his lips. So far, I have accompanied you to watch the dragon-slaying drama for 3 days, and the number of Gisaurus that have died in your hands is almost in the double digits. You have indeed shown your invincible power very well, but what is the meaning of this kind of killing? To vent your anger? To vent your anger? Or do you think that the traitor might be hiding inside those Gisaurus? Moreover, the foundation of the existence of the tombs of immortals is these Gisaurus. If you kill all the Gisaurus, the structure of the tombs of immortals will be finished, and the inheritance that you guys have worked so hard to leave in those years will also be ruined. Or, are you going to use this kind of heroic way to make me fall in love with you so that we can get married? I'm sorry, I'm not really into this kind of thing, and I don't think you'll be so bold and unrestrained. In that case, after thinking about it, I could only ask the question I just asked. Senior Tetragon, are you suffering from hormonal imbalance? Looking at Tetragon's cold eyes, Wang Lu said, "Don't worry, I won't laugh at you." On the path of immortal cultivation, the higher the realm, the more likely it is for a cultivator to suffer from some quirks. For example, I know that there is an old man named Shizhou Jin, who devoted his whole life to promoting the way of reproduction, which caused him to fall from a person of high character to a peerless aberration. Therefore, if you tell me now that your hobby is to kill Gisaurus, I will really believe it. Senior Tetragon, are you the kind of person who is suffering from hormonal imbalance? To Wang Lu's sincere question, Tetragon's response was to turn his head and lock his eyes on a leisurely floating Gisaurus on the other side of the infinitely distant river of stars. The next moment, Tetragon disappeared from his original place. In the blink of an eye, he appeared thousands of miles away. His slender jade-like hand turned into a sharp invisible blade and cut off the head of the Gisaurus. A Gisaurus, which was born with magical ability and whose power was comparable to that of an immortal beast, was killed by Tetragon in one move. Wang Lu, who watched all of this from the side, gently sighed. A person with hormonal imbalance probably can't make such a decisive slash. Before he could finish his words, Wang Lu felt that Tetragon's gaze changed slightly. Because the mystery of that slash just now was not so easy to see. At least for most of the cultivators in 9 regions, they could only sigh with emotion at the invincible power of Tetragon, but they did not understand that the slash she raised was the sharp blade of the immortal heart. On the one hand, it proved that her mentality was still rational and calm. On the other hand, it was also a test for Wang Lu to see if he could understand her intention. Of course, Wang Lu could see it clearly. Although there was a world of difference in strength between them, his eyesight was absolutely not bad. 150 years ago, he once fought against a genuine fallen immortal head-on. He had seen a lot about the means of immortals. However, these were all details. After this slash, Wang Lu was finally able to confirm his conjecture. He shook his head and said, "If your current killing is not because of the hormonal imbalance, then, the only explanation I can think of is this. These Gisaurus have a reason to die. But they are clearly the basis of the group of immortal tombs that you have painstakingly found and cultivated. If you need to kill them, you should have killed them a long time ago. So, the change should be after your resuscitation, right? No, it should be not long ago, because with your temperament, I'm afraid you won't have any patience in this matter. As for the content of the change, I guess it's because you have been poisoned by some irreparable and extremely destructive poison?" A trace of surprise appeared on Tetragon's face, but she quickly restrained it. She had expected that Wang Lu was very keen, but she did not expect that his keenness could reach this point. For 3 days, she did not explain what she was doing at all, but Wang Lu could actually infer all this almost out of thin air. She examined Wang Lu with unprecedented concentration. It was not a strong aggressiveness, but it could penetrate all external defenses. After a long time, Tetragon was somewhat satisfied, but also somewhat helplessly opened his mouth to reveal the truth. Yes, these Gisaurus have been contaminated. The fallen immortals can instigate them at any time with a password, and then take the treasures buried in their bodies as their own. Of course, with the vision of the fallen immortals, they may not be interested in the heritage we left behind, but at least we will never have the chance to get it again. Wang Lu shrugged and said, but you cut off these Gisaurus so quickly, but it seems that you didn't have time to take anything out of them. You didn't even have time to deal with the hundreds of millions of creatures in the Gisaurus. It's better than more Gisaurus being contaminated. Senior Gem Emperor explained, this poison. 16,000 years ago, we had a deep understanding of it. It's highly contagious, irreversible corrosive, and absolutely lethal when it breaks out. The only way to deal with it is to eliminate all the infected people the moment it's discovered. This is a mercy to everyone. When he heard this, Wang Lu was shocked and could not help but be silent for a long time. Was there really such a terrible poison in this world? Even Gisaurus, a magical creature that could contain a world, could not resist it? However, from another point of view, the person who made and administered the poison was a high and mighty immortal, and his means were indeed not something that the cultivators of 9 regions could understand. So, is your main body staying here to deal with this strange poison? Tetragon said, would not rest assured if anyone else did this except me. Moreover, no matter how contagious this poison is, there must be a source for it to spread. I think I'm close to grasping the root of it. Wang Lu smiled and said, is there a need to gradually catch that? Right now, there are only a few exiles left in the whirlpool of stars, and they can be easily excluded by the method of elimination. Senior, when you made a prompt decision to expel Bai Zhe and the others, did you ever think that you would encounter such trouble? Tetragon admitted his mistake very frankly, this is indeed an unexpected trouble. But at that time, I had no better choice. And now, your main body is equivalent to being contained here. Is there only one avatar of yours in the City of Immortals? TSK, it seems that if there is no accident, it would be a waste of this layout. When Wang Lu said this, he subconsciously lifted his foot, but soon took it back. No, since this is a layout, it should not be that easy for me to go back. So, Senior, is this the reason why you coaxed and pestered me to stay? Tetragon said, here, my main body can take care of you. In the City of Immortals, there are your companions and my avatar, but only between these two, no one can help you. Strictly speaking, the space between the whirlpool of stars and the City of Immortals was also the territory that had been developed by the Wuxia League. However, in this case, no one could guarantee that it was safe. Wang Lu was silent for a while and said, can you fully grasp the situation in the City of Immortals through the connection between your main body and avatar? Of course. Tetragon said, if you are interested in the situation over there, I can tell you that the fallen immortals in the City of Immortals have begun to act. I can clearly smell their stench, but... Wang Lu sighed and said, but you still can't accurately locate them. I'm starting to suspect that your sense of smell might have been taken advantage of by others. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.